If you think marriage can save you, you've already lost. But when Adrian Whitmore stood at the altar in his $1,000 suit with eyes like winter steel, he wasn't there to be saved. He was there to survive. And the woman beside him in borrowed white silk? She wasn't his choice. She was his last option. This is the story of two people who signed away their lives before they ever learned to live, and what happened when the ink dried and the cage door locked behind them. Stay until the end, because what starts as obligation is about to become something neither of them can control. The ballroom smelled like old money and fresh regret. Evelyn Carter stood in the bridal suite with her mother's hands shaking on her shoulders, staring at a reflection she barely recognized. The dress was beautiful in the way expensive things always were, cream silk that cost more than her father's last car, fitted perfectly by strangers who measured her like livestock at auction. Her dark hair had been pulled back so tight it hurt. Her makeup made her look older, composed, like a woman who knew what she was doing. She didn't. 23 years old, and she was walking into a marriage the way prisoners walk toward execution. Slowly, inevitably, with the kind of sick acceptance that came from having no other choice. Her mother dabbed at tears that wouldn't stop falling. "You look perfect, sweetheart." Perfect for what? Evelyn wanted to ask. Perfect for being sold? Perfect for fixing mistakes I didn't make? But she didn't say any of that. She just nodded and watched her mother's hands tremble as they adjusted the veil one more time, smoothing imaginary wrinkles that didn't exist. "He's a good man," her mother whispered. "Adrian Whitmore comes from a respected family. You'll be taken care of." Taken care of. Like she was something broken that needed managing. Evelyn's throat tightened, but she swallowed it down. She'd been swallowing things down for 6 months now, ever since the night her father came home with his face gray as ash and told them the business was gone. 20 years of work vanished. Not from bad luck or bad planning, but from bad people who'd stolen everything while pretending to be partners. The debt came next, then the threats, then the lawyers with their cold smiles and colder contracts, then Adrian Whitmore. She'd met him exactly twice before today, once at a charity gala where he'd barely looked at her, and once at the contract signing where he'd looked at her even less. He was 31, controlled, and completely unreachable. He spoke in clipped sentences that gave away nothing. His handshake had been firm and brief, like touching ice. The Whitmores needed this marriage to repair their public image after Adrian's father's sudden death and the scandal that followed. The Carters needed it to survive. Simple math, clean transaction, nothing about love, everything about necessity. A knock on the door made her flinch. "It's time," someone said from the other side. Her mother squeezed her hand so hard it hurt. "I'm so sorry, Evelyn. I'm so sorry this is how—" "Don't." Evelyn pulled her hand back gently. "Just don't." Because if her mother kept apologizing, Evelyn might actually break, and she couldn't afford to break. Not today. Not in front of 200 guests who'd come to watch this performance. She picked up the bouquet, white roses she hadn't chosen, and walked out. Teats. The aisle stretched forever. Every step felt like walking underwater. The music swelled around her, but it sounded distant, muffled. Faces turned to watch. She saw colleagues of her father's who used to bounce her on their knees when she was 5. She saw distant relatives who'd stopped calling when the money disappeared. She saw strangers in expensive suits who'd come for the spectacle, the social currency of being invited to a Whitmore wedding. And at the end of it all, standing perfectly still in a charcoal suit that fit like armor, was Adrian. He didn't smile when she reached him. Didn't soften. His jaw was set, his expression carved from stone. When their eyes met, there was no warmth, no reassurance, just a kind of bleak acknowledgement that they were both here, and there was no turning back now. The officiant began speaking words Evelyn couldn't hear over the roar in her own head. This was insane. This was medieval. This was... "Evelyn Marie Carter, do you take this man—" Her mouth went dry. Adrian's eyes were on her, cold, waiting. His expression gave nothing away, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands were clasped too tightly in front of him. He was holding himself together through sheer will. Good. At least she wasn't the only one barely surviving this. "I do." The words came out steadier than she felt. Adrian's turn. The same vows. The same binding words. I do. His voice was flat, mechanical, like he was signing another business contract. Maybe that's all this was to him. Rings were exchanged. Evelyn's hand shook as she slid the platinum band onto Adrian's finger. His hands didn't shake at all when he did the same to her, steady, controlled, like nothing about this moment touched him. You may kiss the bride. Adrian leaned in. The kiss lasted exactly 3 seconds. His lips were cold and it felt like being kissed by a statue. No emotion, no connection, just obligation fulfilled. When he pulled back, Evelyn saw something flicker in his eyes, so fast she almost missed it. Not regret, not anger. Something worse. Resignation. The guests applauded. The photographer snapped pictures. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife. And Evelyn Carter became Evelyn Whitmore in front of 200 witnesses, knowing that the man beside her was as much a stranger now as he'd been an hour ago. The reception was worse. Evelyn sat at the head table with Adrian on her right, both of them facing the crowd like royalty on display. People came up in waves to congratulate them, to toast their happiness, to lie with champagne-slick smiles about how perfect they looked together. Adrian handled it with mechanical precision. Thank you. We appreciate that. Yes, we're very happy. Every word sounded rehearsed. Evelyn tried to match his composure, but her smile felt like it was cracking her face apart. She nodded. She laughed at appropriate moments. She played the part of the blushing bride even though there was nothing to blush about. Her younger brother Marcus found her between courses. He was 19, skinny, with their father's dark eyes and their mother's anxious energy. He pulled her aside near the bathroom hallway where the music was quieter. You okay? He asked. I'm fine. You're a terrible liar. Evelyn's throat burned. Marcus, I hate this, he said quietly. I hate that you're doing this because of us. Because Dad fucked up and I'm in college and Mom can't work and… Stop. She grabbed his arm. This isn't your fault. None of this is your fault. It's not yours either, but it was someone's. And since their father couldn't fix it and their mother couldn't handle it and Marcus couldn't drop out of school, that left Evelyn, the oldest, the responsible one, the one who always figured it out. So she'd figured it out. I'll be okay, she told him. The Whitmores are covering Dad's debts. Your tuition is paid. Mom won't lose the house. That's what matters. Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but someone called Evelyn's name from the ballroom. She squeezed his hand once and walked back into the bright lights and fake smiles. Adrian was talking to an older man in a navy suit, someone important from the way Adrian's posture had shifted slightly, more deferential. When Evelyn approached, Adrian's hand found the small of her back automatically. The touch was light, impersonal, and gone within seconds. Evelyn, this is Richard Sato. He serves on our board. Sato smiled warmly and shook her hand. Congratulations, Mrs. Whitmore. Adrian's a lucky man. Mrs. Whitmore. The name felt foreign. Thank you, she said. I was just telling Adrian how glad we are to see him settling down. Stability is important in leadership. A man with a family is a man with something to protect. Evelyn felt Adrian tense beside her, barely noticeable, just a slight shift. We're very happy, Adrian said. The same line, the same flat delivery. Sato nodded knowingly and moved on to another conversation. The moment he was gone, Adrian's hand dropped from Evelyn's back like she'd burned him. They stood there in silence while music played and people danced and the whole charade continued around them. How much longer? Evelyn asked quietly. Another hour. Then we leave. Leave. To the penthouse, to their wedding night, to the reality of what they'd just signed themselves into. Evelyn's stomach twisted. Adrian glanced at her. For the first time all day, something almost human flickered across his face. You don't have to look so terrified. I'm not terrified. You look like you're about to run. Would you stop me? The question came out sharper than she intended. Adrian's jaw tightened. No, he said simply, but you won't run. You're here because you made a choice, same as me. Some choice. It's the only one we had. He said it like a fact. Cold. Unarguable. And maybe he was right. Maybe this was just survival and she needed to stop looking for something softer in it. The band leader announced the first dance. Adrian offered his hand. Evelyn took it. They walked to the center of the floor while everyone watched, and the photographer circled like a vulture. The music started, something slow and romantic that mocked everything about this moment. Adrian's hand settled on her waist. Evelyn's went to his shoulder. They moved together with the stiff formality of two people who'd never danced before, who didn't know each other's rhythm, who were just trying not to step on each other's feet. "Smile," Adrian murmured. "They're watching." So she smiled, and he almost smiled back. And they swayed through 3 minutes of performance until the song ended and the applause released them. When they finally returned to the table, Evelyn caught Adrian pouring himself a second whiskey, then a third. His face never changed, but his grip on the glass was white-knuckled. He was barely holding it together either. That should have been comforting. It wasn't. The penthouse sat on the 48th floor of a building in the financial district, all glass and steel and breathtaking views of a city that glittered like broken promises. Evelyn walked in still wearing her wedding dress, heels in her hand because her feet were bleeding. Adrian followed, loosening his tie. The door closed behind them with a soft click that sounded too much like finality. For a moment, neither of them moved. The space was massive, open-concept living room flowing into a marble kitchen, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline, furniture that looked expensive and uncomfortable. Everything was pristine, cold, like a showroom. "Your room is down that hall," Adrian said, pointing left. "Mine's on the right. Bathrooms are en suite, kitchen's stocked, cleaning service comes twice a week. Don't touch anything in my office." Evelyn stared at him. "That's it? What else do you want?" "I don't know. A tour? Some basic human conversation?" Adrian's expression didn't change. "You don't need a tour. It's a penthouse, not a labyrinth. And conversation about what? We both know why we're here. We just got married. We signed a contract." The bluntness hit like a slap. Evelyn felt her face flush with anger and humiliation in equal measure. "Right," she said tightly. "Stupid of me to expect anything else." She turned and walked down the left hallway before he could respond. Found the first bedroom, huge, impersonal, with a king bed that looked like it had never been slept in. Her suitcases were already there, delivered earlier by someone she'd never met. She closed the door, locked it, then stood there shaking with rage she couldn't quite name. What had she expected? Romance? Tenderness? Some acknowledgement that they'd just bound their lives together? Stupid. So stupid. This was business. Adrian had made that clear from the beginning. He needed the marriage to stabilize his company's image after his father's death and the resulting scandal about embezzlement and board disputes. She needed it to save her family from ruin. Clean transaction. No feelings required. So why did it hurt so much? Evelyn peeled off his wedding dress and left it in a heap on the floor. She washed her face, scrubbing away the expensive makeup until she looked like herself again. Then she pulled on an old t-shirt and crawled into the massive bed that smelled like nothing and nobody. She didn't cry. She was too angry to cry. But she lay there in the dark, listening to the city hum outside the windows, and wondered how long you could live with someone before you stopped feeling like a ghost in your own life. Boom. Adrian stood in his own bedroom staring at nothing. The whiskey glass in his hand was empty. He'd drained it the moment he walked in. Now he was just holding it, feeling the weight of crystal, focusing on something tangible because everything else felt too big to process. He'd done it, actually gone through with it, married a woman he didn't know to fix problems he didn't create, because that's what Whitmores did. They fixed things. They handled crises. They sacrificed personal feelings for family legacy and business continuity and all the other bullshit his father had drilled into him since birth. His father. Dead 6 months and still controlling Adrian's life from beyond the grave. The old man had built an empire through ruthlessness and vision, but he'd also built it on shaky ground, backroom deals that bent laws, partnerships with people who didn't honor contracts, risks that eventually came crashing down. When he died suddenly of a heart attack, the vultures descended. Board members questioning leadership, investors pulling funding, competitors smelling blood. The company was bleeding out. The family reputation was in tatters. The solution? Stability. The appearance of a man settled, mature, ready to lead with wisdom instead of his father's reckless ambition. The solution? Marriage. Adrian had resisted at first. Marriage was supposed to mean something. His parents' marriage had been cold and strategic, and he'd watched his mother wither under the weight of it until she was just a beautiful shell going through motions. He'd sworn he wouldn't do that, wouldn't trap someone in that kind of emptiness. But then the debts came due. The board issued ultimatums. The lawyers spelled out exactly how bad things would get if he didn't stabilize quickly. And Richard Sato, the board's lead director, had mentioned the Carters. A respectable family fallen on hard times. A daughter who was educated, poised, desperate enough to agree. Perfect. Adrian hated how perfect it was. He'd met Evelyn twice before proposing. She was beautiful in an understated way, dark eyes that watched everything, sharp intelligence that made her dangerous if you weren't paying attention. She was also clearly terrified and trying to hide it. He'd wanted to tell her she didn't have to do this, that there had to be another way. But there wasn't. Not for him. Not for her. So he'd made the offer. She'd accepted. And now they were married strangers living in the same cage. Adrian set down the glass and loosened his collar. His reflection in the window looked hollow. 31 years old, and he felt ancient. Worn down by responsibilities he never asked for and expectations he couldn't escape. He wondered if Evelyn was okay, then pushed the thought away because it didn't matter. She'd signed the papers. She'd said the vows. She was fine. She had to be fine. They both did. Evelyn couldn't sleep. She lay there for hours, watching shadows move across the ceiling, listening to the building settle and creak. Around 2 a.m, she gave up and wandered out to the kitchen. The lights were motion-activated, flooding the space with cold white brightness that made her squint. She found a glass, filled it with water, and drank it standing at the sink while the city sprawled below like a living thing. Couldn't sleep either? She spun around. Adrian stood in the archway wearing sweatpants and nothing else. His chest was lean, defined, the body of someone who worked out from discipline rather than vanity. His hair was messy for the first time all day. He looked human, exhausted and human. "Sorry," Evelyn said. "I didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't. I don't sleep much." He moved into the kitchen and pulled out a bottle of water from the fridge. They stood there in awkward silence while the building hummed around them. "About earlier," Adrian finally said. "I was harsh. You were honest." "Same thing." Evelyn almost smiled. Almost. "I guess so." Adrian leaned against the counter, studying her. His eyes weren't as cold in the dim light, just tired, maybe searching for something. "This is going to be harder than either of us thought," he said quietly. "What gave it away?" "The fact that we can barely look at each other without feeling like we made a terrible mistake." The bluntness should have stung, but instead it felt almost relieving. At least he was saying it out loud. "So what do we do?" Evelyn asked. "We figure it out. We set boundaries. We live parallel lives until this whole thing makes sense." "Does it ever make sense?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "It has to. Because if it didn't, they just destroyed their lives for nothing." Evelyn understood that calculation. She'd been making it all night. "What are your boundaries?" she asked. "I work late. I travel for business. I need space to think. And I don't—" He stopped, reconsidered his words. "I don't do well with expectations. Don't expect me to be something I'm not." "Fair enough. Brutal, but fair." "My boundaries," Evelyn said slowly. "I'm not your accessory. I'll play the part in public, but in here, I'm a person. I have opinions. I make my own decisions, and I won't apologize for existing in your space." Something flickered in Adrian's eyes. Respect, maybe, or recognition. "Deal," he said. They shook hands like business partners. The touch lingered a second longer than necessary before they both pulled back. "Good night, Evelyn." "Good night, Adrian." She went back to her room. This time, she managed to sleep. Book. The first week was worse than the first night. They moved around each other like ghosts, occupying the same space without ever really connecting. Adrian left early for work, sometimes before dawn, and came home late, usually after Evelyn had already eaten dinner alone. When they did cross paths, conversation was minimal, polite, careful. "How was your day?" "Fine." "You?" "Fine." Lies wrapped in civility. Evelyn tried to build some kind of routine. She'd graduated with a degree in literature, but never pursued it because her father needed help with the family business. Now that business was gone, and she was trapped in a penthouse with nothing to do but exist. She read. She walked around the neighborhood. She avoided calling her mother because every conversation ended with the same question. Are you happy? No, Mom. I'm married to a stranger who treats me like an inconvenient roommate. I'm living in a prison that cost $8 million. I wake up every morning wondering who I've become. But she never said that. She just said, I'm fine. Everything's fine. More lies. On Friday night, Adrian came home earlier than usual. Evelyn was in the kitchen making dinner, pasta, something simple, when she heard the door open. You're home early, she said without turning around. Meeting got canceled. Adrian appeared in the kitchen doorway. He looked exhausted. His tie loosened, dark circles under his eyes. You're cooking. I eat. Sometimes I cook the food I eat. I can order something if you prefer. I already made enough for two. You're welcome to have some if you want. Adrian hesitated, then nodded. Thank you. They ate in silence at the massive dining table that could seat 12. The food was decent. The tension was suffocating. Halfway through the meal, Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, and set it face down. Problem? Evelyn asked. Always. Want to talk about it? Not particularly. Right. Of course. Another silence. Then Adrian set down his fork and looked at her directly for the first time in days. One of our suppliers is backing out of a major contract, he said abruptly. They're citing concerns about stability, which is code for they think I can't handle running the company. Evelyn blinked. Why are you telling me this? I don't know. You asked. You never answer when I ask. Adrian's expression tightened. Maybe I'm trying something different. It wasn't much, but it was something. Can you replace them? Evelyn asked carefully. Eventually, but it'll cost us time and credibility. Both things we don't have. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration breaking through his usual control. My father spent 30 years building this company, and 6 months after he's gone, everyone's circling like sharks. Maybe they're just scared. Of what? Of you not being him. Adrian's eyes snapped to hers, cold, almost angry. I'm not my father. I know. But do they? The question hung between them. Adrian stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Really seeing her. Not just the woman he'd married out of necessity, but an actual person with thoughts that might be worth hearing. No, he finally said. They don't. Then show them. It's not that simple. Nothing is. Adrian almost smiled. It was brief, barely there, but Evelyn caught it. A crack in the armor. A glimpse of the person underneath all that control. They finished dinner. Adrian helped clear the dishes without being asked. When Evelyn said goodnight and headed to her room, she felt something shift. Not affection, not even friendship, but maybe the beginning of coexistence that didn't feel quite so lonely. 2 weeks in, Evelyn discovered Adrian's secret. She'd gone to bed early but woke up thirsty around midnight. On her way to the kitchen, she noticed light coming from under Adrian's office door, the one room he'd explicitly told her not to enter. She should have kept walking, should have respected his boundaries like they'd agreed. But she heard something, a sound that stopped her cold. Crying, not loud, not dramatic, just quiet, broken sounds of someone who thought they were alone. Evelyn's hand hovered over the door. Every instinct screamed to walk away, to give him privacy, to pretend she hadn't heard. But she couldn't. She knocked softly. Adrian? The crying stopped instantly. I'm fine. Go to bed. His voice was rough, strained, not fine at all. I heard you, Evelyn said through the door. Then you should learn to mind your own business. The words were harsh, but his voice cracked on the last syllable. Evelyn's chest tightened. I'm coming in, she said. Don't! She opened the door. Adrian sat at his desk with his head in his hands, surrounded by paperwork and financial reports spread across every surface. His shoulders were shaking. When he looked up, his eyes were red and his face was wet. He looked destroyed. Get out, he said hoarsely. Evelyn closed the door behind her. No. This isn't your concern. You're my husband. That makes it my concern. We're not. Adrian stopped, took a shuddering breath. We're not actually married. Not in any way that matters. Evelyn moved closer, slowly, like approaching something wounded. What's going on? I said get out. And I said no. Adrian stood up abruptly, knocking papers to the floor. You don't get it. You don't get any of this. I'm drowning here. The company is falling apart. The board wants me gone. My father's legacy is burning, and I can't. His voice broke. I can't fix it. I can't fix any of it. The confession shattered something in the room. All his control, all his carefully maintained distance, gone. Just a man falling apart under impossible weight. Evelyn didn't think. She just moved forward and wrapped her arms around him. Adrian went rigid. Don't! Shut up. She held him while he tried to pull away, held him until he stopped fighting, and then, finally, he broke. His arms came around her and he buried his face in her shoulder and he cried like someone who'd been holding it in for months, maybe years. She felt him shaking against her, felt the dampness of tears soaking through her shirt, and she just held on. They stood there for minutes that felt like hours. Eventually, Adrian's breathing steadied. The shaking stopped. But he didn't let go. I'm sorry, he whispered against her hair. For what? For being weak. You're not weak, you're human. Same thing in my world. Evelyn pulled back enough to look at him. His face was ravaged, vulnerable in a way that made her chest ache. Your father did this to you, didn't he? Made you think showing emotion was failure. Adrian's jaw clenched. My father made me into someone who could run a company. That requires sacrifice. Sacrifice or self-destruction? What's the difference? God, he actually meant it. He'd been taught that caring meant weakness and vulnerability meant failure. No wonder he was falling apart. You don't have to carry this alone, Evelyn said softly. Yes, I do. That's the job. What if it wasn't? What if you let someone help? Like who? You? He said it like it was impossible, like the idea of her being useful was absurd. Evelyn should have been insulted, but instead she just felt sad. Sad for him. Sad for both of them. Why not me? She asked. Because you're here out of obligation, not choice. So are you. Adrian stared at her. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then something in his expression shifted. Not softening exactly, but recognition. Like he was seeing her again, seeing past the contract and the convenience to the person standing in front of him. I'm a mess, he said quietly. Join the club. You deserve better than this. So do you. He almost smiled. Almost. Then he pulled away gently and turned back to his desk, wiping his face with the back of his hand. You should go to bed. I have work to finish. Adrian, please. It wasn't harsh, just exhausted. A man who'd shown too much and needed to rebuild his walls. Evelyn wanted to argue, wanted to push, but she could see he was hanging on by a thread. Okay, she said, but I'm here. If you need anything, I'm here. Adrian nodded without looking at her. Evelyn left, closing the door softly behind her. But as she walked back to her room, she realized something had changed. They weren't just strangers anymore. They were two people trapped in the same impossible situation, both trying not to drown. Maybe that was enough to build something on. Or maybe it was just the beginning of breaking each other completely. What Evelyn didn't know as she closed that door was that Adrian had been seconds away from calling his lawyer to end everything, to dissolve the marriage and face whatever consequences came. And what Adrian didn't know was that Evelyn had 3 missed calls from her brother Marcus, each one more desperate than the last, because the man who destroyed their father's business had just been spotted back in town. The debt might be paid, but the danger was far from over. The next morning arrived with the kind of gray light that made everything look washed out and tired. Evelyn woke to her phone buzzing on the nightstand. 3 missed calls from Marcus, all from last night while she'd been standing in Adrian's office watching him fall apart. She sat up, ice flooding her veins, and called him back. He answered on the first ring. Where the hell have you been? Marcus's voice was sharp with panic. I've been trying to reach you for hours. I was asleep. What's wrong? He's back. 2 words. That's all it took for Evelyn's entire world to tilt. What do you mean he's back? Vincent Cross, the bastard who destroyed Dad's business. He's in the city. I saw him myself yesterday outside Mom's house, just standing there on the sidewalk, staring at the door like he owned the place. Vincent Cross. The name tasted like poison. He'd been Dad's business partner, the one who'd systematically embezzled funds while smiling to their faces, who'd made the whole thing look like Dad's incompetence when the audits came. By the time they'd figured it out, Cross had vanished and the money was gone. The Whitmore marriage contract had paid off the debt, but it hadn't touched Cross. Couldn't touch him. He'd covered his tracks too well. Did he approach her? Evelyn asked, forcing her voice steady. No, but Evie, he was there for 20 minutes. Just watching. Mom's terrified. She won't leave the house. Evelyn's grip tightened on the phone. Did you call the police? And tell them what? That a guy stood on a public sidewalk? They can't do anything unless he actually threatens someone. Then what do you want me to do? I don't know. You're the one who married into money. Maybe your new husband has connections. Maybe he can make Cross disappear. The bitterness in Marcus's voice cut deep. He hated this marriage, hated that she'd sacrificed herself, and now he was asking her to use that sacrifice to protect them. I'll figure something out, Evelyn said quietly. Yeah, you always do. He hung up. Evelyn sat there in the expensive bedroom that didn't feel like hers, staring at the phone, feeling the weight of everything crushing down. The debt was paid, but the danger wasn't gone. Cross was back and he was circling. Why? What did he want? She got dressed mechanically, jeans, sweater, something that felt like armor, and went to find Adrian. He was in the kitchen, already dressed for work in a charcoal suit that made him look untouchable again. Whatever vulnerability she'd seen last night was buried deep. His face was blank, controlled, like nothing had happened. Morning, he said without looking up from his coffee. We need to talk. I have a meeting in 40 minutes. This can't wait. Something in her tone made him look up. His eyes were still tired, but sharp now, assessing. What happened? Evelyn told him. All of it. Vincent Cross, the embezzlement, the way he destroyed her family and disappeared. And now he was back, watching her mother's house like a predator sizing up prey. Adrian listened without interrupting. His expression gave nothing away, but his knuckles went white around his coffee mug. Do you know where he's staying? Adrian asked when she finished. No. Does your family owe him money? No, he owes us, but we'll never see it. Then why is he back? I don't know. That's what scares me. Adrian set down the mug and pulled out his phone. He dialed, waited, then spoke in the clipped tone of someone used to being obeyed. Richard, I need information on someone. Vincent Cross. Late 50s, fraud charges from 5 years ago that didn't stick. I want to know where he is, what he's doing, and who he's connected to. Today. He hung up. Richard Sato? Evelyn asked. He has resources. If Cross is in the city, we'll know by tonight. Why are you helping me? Adrian's jaw tightened. Because you're my wife, and nobody threatens what's mine. The possessiveness in his voice should have bothered her. Instead, it sent something warm and dangerous through her chest. He wasn't doing this out of affection. He was doing it because she was his responsibility, his asset, part of the package he'd married. But right now, she didn't care about the reasons. She just needed someone powerful enough to make Cross back off. Thank you, she said. Adrian nodded once and grabbed his briefcase. I have to go. Don't leave the building without security. I don't have security. You do now. His name is James. He'll be in the lobby in an hour. Then he was gone, leaving Evelyn standing in the kitchen, feeling like she'd just been claimed in a way she didn't fully understand. Adrian's day was a parade of problems he couldn't fix fast enough. The board meeting ran 3 hours over schedule. Half the directors were pushing to sell off parts of the company to stabilize finances. The other half wanted to double down on risky investments to prove they weren't afraid. Nobody wanted to listen to Adrian's middle ground proposal because they were too busy using this crisis to position themselves for power. Richard Sato caught him in the hallway after. We need to talk about your leadership, Richard said quietly. Not now. Yes, now. The board is losing confidence. Adrian stopped walking and turned to face him. Then the board needs to grow a spine. I've been in charge for 6 months and I'm cleaning up 30 years of my father's messes. They want stability? Tell them to stop panicking every time the stock dips. Richard's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Respect or warning, Adrian couldn't tell. Your father built this company with vision and ruthlessness. You're trying to build it with caution. That makes people nervous. My father's ruthlessness is why we're in this mess. Maybe. But it's also why we exist at all. The words hit harder than they should have. Because Richard was right. Adrian's father had been brilliant and destructive in equal measure. He'd built an empire on questionable ethics and sheer force of will, and now Adrian was trying to stabilize something that was never meant to be stable. It felt impossible. Did you find anything on Vincent Cross? Adrian asked, changing the subject. Richard pulled out a folder. He's staying at the Meridian downtown, suite 1804. He's been meeting with several people from the financial district. No clear pattern yet, but my contact is digging. Who's he meeting with? That's the interesting part. One of them works for us. Adrian's blood went cold. Who? Derek Chen, junior executive in acquisitions. Derek Chen. Adrian knew him. Mid-30s, ambitious, always pushing for bigger deals. He'd been one of the loudest voices in today's meeting, advocating for aggressive expansion. Are you suggesting Chen is working with Cross? I'm suggesting it's worth investigating. Adrian took the folder. Thank you. Adrian? Richard's voice dropped. Be careful. If Cross is back and he's connected to someone inside the company, this could get ugly fast. Everything's already ugly. Then don't make it worse by acting emotionally. You have a wife to protect now. That changes the stakes. Adrian's jaw clenched. He hated that Richard was right. Hated that marrying Evelyn had given him a new vulnerability that enemies could exploit. But it was done. She was his now. And that meant protecting her whether he wanted to or not. Evelyn spent the day feeling like a prisoner in the penthouse. James, the security guard, arrived exactly when Adrian said he would. 6'3", ex-military, the kind of person you didn't argue with. He positioned himself in the lobby and texted Evelyn his number with instructions to call if she needed anything. She didn't leave the building, didn't risk it. Instead, she paced the penthouse like a caged animal, checking her phone every 5 minutes for updates from Marcus or her mom. Nothing. Around 3 in the afternoon, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? Silence on the other end. Then a man's voice, smooth and cold as a knife. Evelyn Carter. Or should I say, Evelyn Whitmore now. Her heart stopped. Who is this? You know who this is? I saw your brother yesterday. He looks good. Worried, but good. Your mother, too. She's aged since I last saw her. Vincent Cross. Evelyn's hand shook, but she forced her voice steady. What do you want? Just to talk. I think we got off on the wrong foot all those years ago. You destroyed my family. I freed your family from a failing business. Your father was driving that company into the ground long before I took my share. You stole millions. I took what I was owed. Big difference. Rage flooded through her so hot she could barely breathe. You're a thief and a liar. And if you go near my family again, you'll what? Cross's voice turned sharp. You'll send your rich husband after me? Please, Adrian Whitmore has enough problems. His company is bleeding out. The board wants him gone. He's barely keeping his head above water. You think he has time to worry about some old grudge? Stay away from us. Here's the thing, Evelyn. You married into power, but you don't understand how power works. It's not about money. It's about leverage. And right now, I have leverage over your family that your new last name can't protect you from. What leverage? That's for me to know. But here's some free advice. Your father didn't just lose money in that business collapse. He lost evidence. Evidence that could send him to prison if it fell into the wrong hands. Evidence that I kept. Insurance, you might say. Evelyn's blood turned to ice. You're lying. Am I? Ask your father about the offshore accounts. Ask him where that missing 100,000 really went. Then call me back when you're ready to negotiate. The line went dead. Evelyn stood there shaking, the phone pressed to her ear long after the call ended. Her mind was racing. Cross was bluffing. He had to be. Dad hadn't done anything illegal. He'd been the victim, right? But doubt crept in like poison, because she didn't know. She'd never seen the books, never asked the hard questions. She just believed Dad when he said he'd been betrayed. What if there was more to the story? She called Marcus. Cross just called me, she said when he answered. What? How did he get your number? I don't know, but he's claiming Dad did something illegal, that he has evidence. Silence. Too long. Marcus? He's lying, Marcus said, but his voice sounded hollow. Do you know something I don't? No, Look, Dad made some mistakes, okay? But nothing criminal. Cross is just trying to scare you. It's working. Don't let him get in your head. That's what he wants. But the damage was done. The seed of doubt was planted, and Evelyn could feel it taking root. Adrian came home late. Evelyn was sitting in the dark living room, staring out at the city lights, when she heard the door open. He walked in, saw her sitting there, and stopped. Are you okay? He asked. Cross called me today. Adrian went very still. What did he say? She told him everything, the threats, the claims about her father, the insurance evidence. Adrian listened with that same blank expression, but she could see his mind working, calculating. He's manipulating you, Adrian said finally. What if he's not? What if my father really did something illegal and I just married you to cover up a crime? Then we deal with it. We? This isn't your problem. You're my wife. That makes it my problem. There it was again, that possessive certainty, like she was territory he'd claimed and now had to defend. I need to know the truth, Evelyn said, about my father, about what really happened. Then we'll find out. Richard has someone investigating Cross's movements. We'll know more tomorrow. And if Cross is telling the truth? Adrian's expression hardened. Then we make him disappear. The way he said it, flat, matter of fact, sent a chill through her. This was the son of a man who'd built an empire on ruthlessness. Adrian had been trained to eliminate threats, not with his hands, but with money, lawyers, connections. The legal brutality of people who never got their hands dirty. I don't want anyone to get hurt, Evelyn said quietly. Too late for that. He threatened your family. That means he threatened me. Why do you keep saying that? I'm not really yours. This marriage is just what? Adrian cut her off. Just business? Just a contract? Tell yourself whatever you need to sleep at night, Evelyn, but the moment you walked down that aisle, you became mine, and I protect what's mine. The intensity in his voice made her breath catch. This wasn't affection. It was something darker, more primal. The instinct of a man who'd grown up learning that everything he had could be taken if he showed weakness. You don't even like me, Evelyn whispered. Liking you has nothing to do with it. He turned and walked toward his office, stopped at the door, looked back. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we go on the offensive. Then he disappeared, leaving Evelyn sitting in the dark with her heart pounding and her head spinning. She should have been scared of him, that cold calculation, that willingness to destroy anyone who threatened his territory. Instead, she felt something she hadn't expected. Safe. Whoops. The next day, Richard's investigator delivered a file that changed everything. Adrian sat in his office reading through it twice to make sure he understood. Then he called Evelyn in. She came hesitantly, still wary from last night's conversation. Adrian gestured to the chair across from his desk. Sit. She sat. He slid the folder across to her. Derek Chen, one of my executives, has been meeting with Cross regularly for the past 3 weeks. They're planning something. My investigator pulled phone records. They're talking about a hostile takeover. Evelyn's eyes widened. Of your company? Of what's left of it. Cross has investors lined up. Chen is feeding him inside information about our vulnerabilities. They're going to make a play at next month's board meeting. Can they do that? If they have enough votes, yes. And if they succeed, the first thing they'll do is dissolve this marriage to destabilize my claim to leadership, which means your family's debt protection disappears. The implications hit Evelyn like a freight train. So this was never about my father. Cross was using my family to get to you. Looks that way. He knew marrying you was my attempt at stabilization. He's trying to prove it didn't work, that I'm still vulnerable. Evelyn's hands clenched into fists. That son of a bitch. Agreed. But here's where it gets interesting. Adrian leaned forward. Cross's investors are legitimate, which means he's not working alone. Someone with real money is backing this play. Someone who wants me gone. Who? That's what we need to find out. Evelyn looked at the folder, at the evidence of conspiracy and manipulation, and felt rage burning through her fear. Cross had used her family as bait, had threatened her mother, had made Evelyn doubt her own father, all to destroy Adrian's company and profit from the wreckage. "What do we do?" she asked. Adrian's smile was cold. "We set a trap." The plan was simple and brutal. They would let Chen think he'd won. Let him believe Adrian was too distracted by the Cross situation to notice the internal betrayal. Meanwhile, Adrian would gather evidence of Chen's misconduct, breach of fiduciary duty, corporate espionage, fraud. Enough to bury him legally and scare off the investors backing Cross. But it required bait. Someone to make Chen feel comfortable enough to make a mistake. "I'll do it," Evelyn said when Adrian explained. "No." "Why not? I'm already involved." "Chen doesn't know you suspect him. If I approach him, play the worried wife asking questions about the company, he might reveal something useful. It's too dangerous. Everything about this is dangerous. At least this way I'm doing something instead of hiding in your penthouse like a prisoner." Adrian stared at her. She could see him calculating, weighing risks, trying to find another option. But they both knew there wasn't one. "Fine," he said finally. "But James goes with you, and you wear a wire." "A wire? You're serious?" "I don't do anything halfway." That night they planned it out like a military operation. Evelyn would attend the company's charity gala next week, an event she was expected to attend anyway as Adrian's wife. Chen would be there. She'd approach him casually, express concern about the company's stability, ask if Adrian was in over his head, give Chen an opening to either recruit her or reveal his hand. "What if he doesn't take the bait?" Evelyn asked. "Then we try something else. And if he does, then we destroy him." The matter-of-fact way Adrian said it reminded Evelyn that she'd married into a world where warfare was waged in boardrooms and courtrooms instead of battlefields. The violence was legal, but no less ruthless. "Have you ever destroyed someone before?" she asked quietly. Adrian's expression didn't change. "Yes." "Did you regret it?" "No, they were trying to destroy me first." Simple logic, brutal efficiency. This was who Adrian Whitmore was. Someone who'd been raised to see life as a zero-sum game where you either won or got crushed. No wonder he couldn't let himself be vulnerable. Vulnerability meant defeat. "What happens after we expose Chen?" Evelyn asked. "Cross will just find another way to come at us. Not if we take away his resources. Chen's evidence will implicate the investors backing him. Once they're exposed, Cross loses his leverage. He's just a washed-up criminal with no power. And then he disappears. One way or another." The threat hung in the air between them. Evelyn wanted to ask what that meant. Wanted to know if Adrian was capable of actual violence or just legal destruction. But she didn't ask, because part of her didn't want to know the answer. Okay. The week crawled by with the slow torture of waiting for battle. Evelyn and Adrian fell into a strange rhythm. They still lived parallel lives, but now there was purpose binding them together. A common enemy. A shared goal. Every night they sat in Adrian's office going over details, refining the plan, preparing for every possible outcome. And somewhere in those long nights, something shifted. Adrian started asking her opinions, actually listening when she pointed out flaws in his logic. He'd pour her whiskey without asking if she wanted it, just knowing she needed it. She'd bring him food when he forgot to eat, not out of obligation, but because watching him run himself into the ground made her chest tight. They weren't friends, weren't lovers, but they were becoming allies, partners in survival. The night before the gala, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She wandered out to the living room and found Adrian already there, standing by the windows, staring out at the city. "Nervous?" he asked without turning around. "Terrified." "Good. Fear keeps you sharp." Evelyn moved to stand beside him. Their reflections overlapped in the glass. "What if this doesn't work?" she asked. "Then we try something else." "You always have a backup plan?" "Always." She believed him. Adrian Whitmore didn't leave anything to chance. He controlled every variable he could and prepared for the ones he couldn't. "Your father taught you that," she said quietly. Adrian's jaw tightened. "Among other things." "Do you miss him?" "Every day, and I hate him for it." The honesty surprised her. Adrian never talked about his father, never acknowledged the complicated grief of losing someone who shaped you and damaged you in equal measure. He made you strong, Evelyn offered. He made me cold. Maybe those are the same thing. Are they? She didn't answer, because she didn't know. She was still learning who Adrian really was beneath all that control, still discovering that the ice was thinner than it looked. Thank you, Adrian said suddenly, for helping with this. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. Cross threatened my family. He threatened you. That's different. Evelyn looked at him. His profile was sharp in the city lights, all angles and shadows. Handsome in a cold way that should have been off-putting but wasn't. Why does that matter to you? She asked. Why do I matter? Adrian turned to face her. For once, his mask slipped. She saw the exhaustion, the fear he wouldn't admit, the bone-deep loneliness of someone who'd spent his whole life fighting alone. Because you're the first person in a long time who doesn't want something from me, he said quietly. You're just here, surviving the same hell I am. That's worth protecting. It wasn't a declaration of love, wasn't even affection, but it was honest in a way Adrian rarely allowed himself to be. Evelyn's throat tightened. I'm still figuring out how to survive you. Join the club. Almost a smile. Almost. They stood there in the dark, two strangers bound by contracts and circumstances, and for the first time since the wedding, Evelyn felt like maybe this wasn't the worst decision she'd ever made. Maybe it was just the hardest. The gala was everything Evelyn expected, and worse. The ballroom glittered with enough wealth to solve world hunger. Men in tuxedos and women in designer gowns circulated like elegant predators, hunting for deals and alliances. Adrian was in his element here, cold, composed, working the room with practiced ease. Evelyn wore a black dress Adrian's stylist had picked out. It was beautiful and impersonal and made her feel like she was in costume. The wire taped under her sternum itched. James was positioned near the bar, watching her with professional intensity. Derek Chen arrived fashionably late. He was younger than Evelyn expected, mid-30s, good-looking in that polished corporate way. When he saw her standing alone while Adrian talked to board members, he approached with a champagne flute and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mrs. Whitmore, you look lovely tonight. Thank you, Derek, right? You remember, I'm flattered. Hard to forget the people trying to save my husband's company. Something flickered across Chen's face. Is that what he told you we're doing? Saving it? Evelyn took a careful sip of champagne. Isn't that what all of you want? Some of us want to save it. Others want to cut our losses before we go down with the ship. And which camp are you in? Chen's smile sharpened. I'm in the camp that wants to survive. Your husband is brilliant, but he's too much like his father. Stubborn, unwilling to make the hard choices. What hard choices? The kind that require letting go of legacy and ego. This company needs fresh blood, new leadership, someone without emotional attachment to the past. There it was, the pitch. He was testing her, seeing if she'd be receptive to the idea of Adrian stepping down. Evelyn let doubt creep into her expression. Is the company really that bad? Worse than Adrian's admitting. The suppliers backing out? That's just the start. We have major investors threatening to pull funding. The board is divided. Without strong, unified leadership, we'll be bankrupt in 6 months. And you could provide that leadership? Chen leaned closer. Conspiratorial. With the right support, yes. I have investors ready to inject capital. I have a plan to restructure, but I need board votes. I need people on my side. People like Adrian's wife? Your opinion matters more than you think. If you were to express concerns about Adrian's capability, people would listen. Evelyn's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. And why would I do that? Because right now you're tied to a sinking ship. If Adrian fails, you fail. Your family's debt protection disappears. But if you help me, I can guarantee that protection continues. Better yet, I can make you wealthy in your own right, not dependent on a husband who treats you like an accessory. The contempt in his voice was clear. He thought Adrian was weak, thought Evelyn was desperate and stupid enough to betray him for money. That's a generous offer, Evelyn said carefully. It's a smart offer. Think about it. Talk to your family. I'm sure they'd want you protected. He handed her a business card with a private number written on the back. Then he smiled, squeezed her arm in a way that made her skin crawl, and walked away. Evelyn stood there with the card burning in her hand, the wire recording every word, and fought the urge to throw up. She'd just played bait perfectly. Chen had revealed his plan. They had him. But the way he talked about Adrian, like he was a dying animal waiting to be put down, made rage flood through her so strong she shook with it. Nobody talked about her husband like that. Not anymore. Brushing. Adrian listened to the recording 3 times. They were in his office, door locked, the only light coming from his desk lamp. Chen's voice played through the laptop speakers, laying out his betrayal in crystal clear detail. When it finished, Adrian sat back in his chair. His expression was unreadable, but his hands were clenched into fists. "We have him," Evelyn said. "We have him." "So what now?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at her with something dark and satisfied in his eyes. "Now we watch him hang himself." Over the next week, they fed Chen exactly what he wanted to hear. Evelyn sent carefully worded texts expressing doubt about Adrian's leadership. Adrian made public missteps that looked like incompetence, canceled meetings, delayed decisions, let his exhaustion show. To the board and the investors, it looked like a man losing control. To Chen, it looked like opportunity. He moved faster than they expected. Within 10 days, he'd called an emergency board meeting and made a formal motion for Adrian to step down as CEO. He had 4 board members backing him. He had investors lined up. He had Cross's money fueling the whole thing. What he didn't have was proof that Adrian had been playing him the whole time. The board meeting happened on a Thursday morning in the company's main conference room. Evelyn wasn't supposed to be there, but Adrian had arranged for her to watch via video feed from his office. She saw Chen present his case, saw him lay out every weakness, every vulnerability, every reason why Adrian Whitmore needed to be removed for the company's own good. Then she saw Adrian stand up. He didn't raise his voice, didn't lose his composure. He simply placed a folder on the table and slid it toward the center. "Derek has made some compelling points," Adrian said calmly. "Unfortunately, they're based on the assumption that I didn't know he was working with Vincent Cross to orchestrate a hostile takeover using embezzled insider information and fraudulent investor guarantees." The room went dead silent. That folder contains evidence of every illegal meeting, every falsified report, every breach of fiduciary duty Derek has committed over the past 6 weeks. It also contains testimony from 3 of his so-called investors who've agreed to cooperate with federal investigators in exchange for immunity. Chen's face went white. "The SEC has been notified," Adrian continued, "as have the authorities investigating Vincent Cross for fraud and corporate espionage. Derek, you're fired. Security will escort you out. The board will convene in 1 hour to discuss how we're going to repair the damage you've caused." Chen opened his mouth, closed it, then made a desperate lunge for the folder. 2 security guards grabbed him before he reached it. They dragged him out while he screamed threats and accusations that no one listened to. The conference room erupted in chaos. Adrian stood there in the center of it all, perfectly composed, and caught the camera watching him. He looked directly at Evelyn through the screen. He didn't smile, but she saw it in his eyes. Victory. Skig. That night, Cross called Evelyn one last time. "You think you won," he said without preamble. "I know we did." "Adrian destroyed Chen. Congratulations. But you haven't destroyed me. I still have evidence on your father. And now that you've made an enemy of me, I'm going to use it." Evelyn's blood ran cold. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" "Check your email. I just sent you a preview. Bank records. Offshore accounts in your father's name. Transactions dated 6 months before the business collapsed. Money that didn't go to save the company. Money that went to pay gambling debts." No. "You fabricated those," Evelyn said, but her voice shook. "Did I? Ask your father. Ask him where he really was all those nights when your mother thought he was working late. Ask him how much he lost before I took my cut." The line went dead. Evelyn's hands trembled as she opened her email. The documents were there, account numbers, transaction dates, her father's signature. It could be fake. Cross was good at forgery, but doubt ate at her. Because she didn't know. She'd never asked the hard questions, never demanded the full truth. What if her father really had lied? What if the debt she'd married Adrian to pay off was built on something worse than betrayal? What if everything she'd sacrificed was for a lie? She sat there staring at the screen until Adrian came home hours later. He found her in the dark living room, laptop open, face wet with tears she didn't remember crying. "Evelyn?" She showed him the documents without a word. Adrian read them. His expression went from confused to hard to something that looked like grief. "I'll have these verified," he said quietly. "But if they're real, then I destroyed my life for nothing. I married you to save a man who lied to us all. You don't know that yet. I can feel it. Something about this is true. Maybe not all of it, but enough." Adrian set the laptop aside and knelt in front of her, took her hands in his. The touch was gentle in a way that undid her completely. "Listen to me," he said. "I don't care if your father is a liar or a saint. I don't care if he gambled away a fortune or built it back. None of that changes what you and I are building here. We're not building anything. We're surviving." "Same thing. Is it?" Adrian's grip tightened. "You're my wife. Whatever mess your family is hiding, we'll deal with it together. You're not alone in this anymore." "Why?" The word came out broken. "Why do you care?" "Because somewhere between signing that contract and tonight, you became more than an obligation. You became the only person I trust. And I'm not losing that. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was something real. Something neither of them had expected to find in this cold arrangement." Evelyn looked at their joined hands, at the man kneeling in front of her who'd gone from stranger to ally to something she didn't have words for yet. "What if I can't handle the truth about my father?" she whispered. "Then I'll handle it for you. That's not fair to you." "I don't care about fair. I care about keeping you intact." And there it was. The raw possessiveness that used to scare her. Now it felt like the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting beneath her feet. "Okay," she said. "Okay? We'll face it together, whatever it is." Adrian pulled her into his arms. She let herself collapse against him, breathing in the scent of expensive cologne and exhaustion, feeling his heartbeat steady against her cheek. They stayed like that for a long time. Two people trapped in a cage of their own making, holding on to each other because there was nothing else left to hold. Outside the windows, the city glittered on, indifferent to the small human dramas playing out in its towers. What neither of them knew was that Vincent Cross had already made his next move, not against Adrian or Evelyn, but against Marcus. And by the time they found out, the boy would be in a police interrogation room answering questions about drug possession charges he swore were planted. Cross's final play wasn't destruction. It was forcing Evelyn to choose between saving her brother and protecting the husband she was just learning to trust, a choice that would burn everything they'd built to ash. The call came at 4 a.m. Evelyn's phone screamed from the nightstand, ripping her from dreams that were already nightmares. She grabbed it with clumsy hands, heart hammering before she was even fully awake. Marcus's name on the screen. She answered. "Evie." His voice was wrecked, terrified. "I need you." "What happened?" "I'm at the police station. They arrested me. They're saying I had drugs in my car, cocaine, a lot of it, but I swear to God I didn't." "Slow down. What police station?" "Downtown precinct. Evie, they're talking about trafficking charges. They're saying I could go to prison for 10 years. This is insane. I don't do drugs. I've never even... I'm coming. Don't say anything to anyone. Do you hear me? Not a single word until I get there." She hung up and was out of bed before her brain caught up with her body. She grabbed jeans, a sweater, moved on autopilot while panic flooded her system. This was Cross. Had to be. This was his retaliation for Adrian destroying Chen. He'd said he'd come after her family, and now he was making good on that threat by framing Marcus for something that could destroy his entire life. She was halfway to the door when Adrian appeared in the hallway, barefoot and alert despite the hour. "What's wrong?" "Marcus was arrested. Drug charges. It's bullshit. It's Cross trying to... I'm coming with you. You don't have to... We're not having this argument again. Get your coat." 10 minutes later, they were in Adrian's car with James driving, speeding through empty streets toward the downtown precinct. Evelyn's hands wouldn't stop shaking. Adrian sat beside her in silence, his jaw set, already working through scenarios she couldn't begin to process. "If Cross planted evidence, we can prove it," Adrian said. "We'll get the best lawyers. We'll fight this." "What if we can't? What if they already have Marcus on camera or witnesses, or then we buy time? We create reasonable doubt. We do whatever it takes." The certainty in his voice steadied her. This was what Adrian did. He fought impossible battles with strategy and resources and the kind of relentless determination that crushed obstacles. But even he couldn't rewrite evidence that didn't exist. The precinct was fluorescent, bright, and soul-crushing at 4:30 in the morning. Evelyn pushed through the doors with Adrian right behind her, both of them too well-dressed for this environment, drawing stares from exhausted cops and hollow-eyed civilians. "I'm here for Marcus Carter," Evelyn told the officer at the front desk. The woman looked bored. "And you are?" "His sister. He called me. I need to see him." "He's being processed. You'll have to wait." "How long?" "Could be hours." Adrian stepped forward. His presence changed something in the room's atmosphere. The way he carried himself, the expensive watch, the quiet authority that came from never being told no. "I'm Adrian Whitmore. I'd like to speak to whoever's in charge of this case." The officer's expression shifted slightly. Recognition or wariness. "That would be Detective Ramirez. I'll see if he's available." She disappeared through a door. Adrian turned to Evelyn. "Let me handle this. Marcus is my brother." "I know, but you're emotional right now and they'll use that against you." "I'm not emotional. I'm just rich and connected. That's currency here." He wasn't wrong. Evelyn hated that he wasn't wrong. 20 minutes later, Detective Ramirez emerged, mid-40s, tired eyes, the look of someone who'd seen every lie humanity could manufacture. "Mr. Whitmore, Mrs. Whitmore, come with me." They followed him to a small interview room that smelled like burnt coffee and desperation. Ramirez closed the door and leaned against it. "Your brother's in a lot of trouble," he said without preamble. "He's innocent," Evelyn said. "They all are. But we found 8 ounces of cocaine in his vehicle during a routine traffic stop. That's not possession. That's intent to distribute. It was planted. By who? Vincent Cross. He's been targeting my family. He's using Marcus to get to me." Ramirez's expression didn't change. "That's a serious accusation. You have proof?" "Cross called me 3 days ago, threatening exactly this kind of retaliation. Check my phone records." "Threatening to frame your brother for drug trafficking in those words?" Evelyn's stomach dropped. "Not in those exact words, but—" "Then all I have is your theory. What I also have is your brother's fingerprints on the packaging, surveillance footage of him meeting with a known dealer 2 weeks ago, and text messages discussing prices and quantities." No, that wasn't possible." "You're lying," Evelyn said flatly. "I'm a lot of things, Mrs. Whitmore. Liar isn't one of them." Adrian's hand found Evelyn's under the table, squeezed once, a warning to stay calm. "Can we see the evidence?" Adrian asked. "Not until formal charges are filed. But your brother's in deep. If he cooperates, maybe we can work something out. If he lawyers up and fights, he's looking at a decade minimum." "He needs a lawyer," Adrian said. "That's his constitutional right." "Sure, but cooperation buys leniency. You'd be surprised how fast people change their tune when they're facing real time." Translation: they wanted Marcus to flip on someone, to give them a bigger fish, which meant they thought he actually was guilty. "I want to see him," Evelyn said. "Not possible right now." "Then when?" "After processing. Could be 6-8 hours." Adrian stood. "Then we'll be back in 8 hours. In the meantime, don't question my brother-in-law without his legal representation present. I'll have someone here within the hour." Ramirez almost smiled. "You do that." They left the precinct into the gray pre-dawn light. Evelyn made it to the car before her legs gave out. She collapsed against the door, gasping for air that wouldn't fill her lungs. "He didn't do this," she choked out. "Marcus doesn't do drugs. He's a kid. He's in college. He doesn't even drink." Adrian pulled her into his arms. "I know. Cross is destroying him. He's going to send my brother to prison for something he didn't do, and there's nothing I can do to stop it. There's always something. We just have to find it." But his voice sounded hollow, like even he wasn't sure this time. "Ijapur sec." They went back to the penthouse. Adrian spent the next 6 hours making calls to lawyers, investigators, people who owed him favors, and people who didn't but would help anyway because refusing Adrian Whitmore came with consequences. Evelyn sat on the couch staring at nothing, her mind replaying every conversation with Cross, looking for the moment she'd missed where he'd been setting this trap. Around noon, Adrian's phone rang. He answered, listened, and his face went carefully blank. I see. Thank you. He hung up and looked at Evelyn with an expression that made her blood freeze. What? That was my investigator. He pulled Marcus's financial records. There have been deposits into his account over the past 6 weeks. 10,000 total, small amounts, 200 here, 500 there, all from untraceable sources. The room tilted. What are you saying? I'm saying the evidence against Marcus is very thorough, too thorough for a simple frame job. You think he's guilty? I think someone spent a lot of time and money making him look guilty. But Evelyn, Adrian's voice was gentle in a way that terrified her. We need to consider the possibility that Cross didn't plant everything, that maybe Marcus got in over his head. No, absolutely not. Marcus wouldn't. People do desperate things when they're scared or in debt. College is expensive. You said yourself your family's been struggling. So you think my brother is a drug dealer now? You think I don't know my own family? I think you know the family you want to see, not necessarily the one that exists. The words hit like a slap, because somewhere deep down, past the panic and denial, doubt was creeping in. Those documents Cross had sent about her father's gambling. The way Marcus had sounded when she'd asked him about it. The too long pause before he'd said it was lies. What if her family wasn't who she thought they were? What if she'd married Adrian to save people who'd lied to her from the beginning? I can't do this, Evelyn whispered. Yes, you can. I can't. This is too much. My father might be a criminal. My brother might be a dealer. Everything I believed about my family might be a lie, and I destroyed my life for nothing. Adrian knelt in front of her, forced her to look at him. Listen to me. I don't care if your entire family is made of liars and thieves. You're not them. You're not responsible for their choices. But I am. I married you because of them. I made you responsible for their debt, and now Cross is using that against both of us. So we cut them loose. Evelyn's breath caught. What? We let the lawyers handle Marcus. We distance ourselves from your father's mess. We protect what we've built here and stop letting them drag us down. They're my family. They're weights around your neck. At some point, you have to choose between drowning with them or cutting the rope. The brutality of it stunned her. This was Adrian's solution. Survival through amputation. Save yourself by abandoning everyone who might pull you under. It was rational, practical. Exactly the kind of cold calculation that had kept him alive in a world designed to destroy people like him. And it made her want to scream. I'm not you, she said quietly. I can't just cut people out because they're inconvenient. Even when they're destroying you? Even then. Adrian stood. His expression was unreadable, but she could see the frustration beneath it. The fundamental disconnect between someone who'd been raised to value loyalty above everything and someone who'd been taught that loyalty was a weakness enemies exploited. Then what do you want to do? He asked. I want to save my brother. I want to prove Cross set this up. I want my family back. And if you can't have all three? Evelyn's throat burned. I don't know. They went back to the precinct that evening. Marcus looked wrecked. 24 hours in holding had stripped away his usual cocky confidence, leaving behind a scared kid who was barely holding it together. He sat across from them in the interview room with his hands shaking and his eyes red. I swear I didn't do this, he said immediately. Someone planted those drugs. I don't even know how they got in my car. The police say they have evidence, Evelyn said carefully. Text messages, surveillance footage, deposits in your bank account. Marcus's face went gray. What deposits? $10,000 over 6 weeks. I don't know where that came from. Someone must have hacked my account or... Marcus! Adrian's voice cut through the panic. Tell us the truth, all of it. Marcus looked at him with something close to hatred. I am telling the truth. Then explain the surveillance footage of you meeting with a dealer. What dealer? I haven't met with anyone. 2 weeks ago, coffee shop downtown. The police have you on camera. Marcus stared at them, then his face crumpled. Oh God, that wasn't a dealer. That was just some guy who needed help with his computer. He offered me $50. I thought it was just a quick job. Did you take the money? Yeah, but you think that was a setup? You think Cross paid someone to meet with me so it would look like a drug deal? Adrian and Evelyn exchanged glances. It was exactly the kind of long game Cross would play. Find someone who looked like a dealer. Pay them to have an innocent conversation with Marcus. Film it. Use it later as evidence. What about the text messages? Evelyn asked. I don't know. I'd have to see them. But Evie, I swear on everything, I'm not dealing drugs. The desperation in his voice was either genuine or the best acting she'd ever seen. Evelyn wanted to believe him. Needed to believe him. But doubt had taken root and she couldn't shake it. The lawyer Adrian hired is good, Evelyn said. He'll fight this. But Marcus, you have to tell him everything, every person you've talked to in the past 6 weeks, every strange interaction, every dollar you can't account for. If Cross is framing you, we need to find the holes in his story. Marcus nodded frantically. Okay, yeah, I'll do whatever you need. Adrian leaned forward. And if there's anything you're hiding, anything at all, now is the time to come clean. Because if we go to war for you and find out you lied, we're done. You understand me? The threat was clear. Marcus looked at Adrian with barely concealed resentment, but nodded. I'm not hiding anything. They left him there with his lawyer. On the way out, Evelyn felt like she was betraying him. Like by not fighting harder, not screaming at every cop in the building, she was admitting doubt she couldn't afford to feel. In the car, she turned to Adrian. Do you believe him? Adrian was quiet for a long time. I believe he believes he's innocent. That's not the same thing. No, it's not. The implications sat heavy between them. If Marcus was lying, Evelyn had just dragged Adrian into defending a guilty man. If he was telling the truth, Cross had built a frame job so perfect, it might be impossible to dismantle. Either way, they were losing. The next 48 hours were a descent into hell. The press got hold of the story. Marcus Carter, brother-in-law to corporate heir Adrian Whitmore, arrested on drug trafficking charges. The tabloids had a field day. Was this the scandal that would finally bring down the Whitmore empire? Was Adrian's marriage to the Carter girl a liability he couldn't afford? The board called an emergency meeting. Adrian went alone. Evelyn watched the live stream from his office, her stomach in knots. Richard Sato led the attack. Adrian, we need to discuss the optics of your current situation. Your brother-in-law's arrest reflects poorly on the company, on you specifically. The public is questioning your judgment. My brother-in-law's arrest has nothing to do with this company, Adrian said coldly. It has everything to do with it when your name is attached, when your family is implicated in criminal activity. He's not my family. He's my wife's brother. The words hit Evelyn like a punch. He's not my family. The clinical detachment in Adrian's voice, the way he distanced himself so easily. This was what survival looked like in his world. Clean amputations, no hesitation. Nevertheless, another board member chimed in, this situation is untenable. We need to consider damage control options, such as distancing the company from the Carter family entirely, perhaps even reconsidering the marriage arrangement itself. Evelyn's breath stopped. They wanted Adrian to divorce her, to erase the marriage that had been meant to stabilize everything. Because now instead of being an asset, she was a liability. Adrian's expression didn't change. That's not on the table. Adrian, I said it's not on the table. My personal life is not subject to board approval. We're here to discuss quarterly earnings, not my marriage. Your marriage is affecting quarterly earnings. Investor confidence is dropping. Stock prices are falling. We're hemorrhaging credibility. Then we rebuild credibility. We don't panic and make reactionary decisions that will make us look weak. But even from the video feed, Evelyn could see Adrian was fighting a losing battle. The board was circling again, smelling blood, using this crisis as another opportunity to question his leadership. And she was the crisis. She was the reason he was vulnerable. The meeting ended with nothing resolved. Adrian came home looking hollowed out, exhausted in a way that went bone deep. They want you to leave me, Evelyn said without preamble. Adrian poured himself a whiskey, drained it, poured another. They want a lot of things. Are you considering it? No. Why not? I'm destroying you. Everything you've worked for is falling apart because of my family. Adrian turned to face her. His eyes were bloodshot, his tie loosened, his carefully maintained control cracking at the edges. Because I don't abandon people when things get hard. My father did that. He threw people away the moment they stopped being useful. I won't become him. Even if keeping me costs you everything? especially then. The conviction in his voice should have been comforting. Instead, it terrified her, because she could see what this was costing him. The sleepless nights, the constant battles, the slow erosion of everything he'd built, and it was all because of her. "What if I left?" Evelyn asked quietly. "What?" "What if I just left, filed for divorce, disappeared, gave you a clean break so you could rebuild without me dragging you down?" Adrian set down the glass very carefully. When he looked at her, his expression was dangerous. "Is that what you want?" "I want to stop being the reason you're falling apart. You're not the reason. The board is the reason. Cross is the reason. Your family's mess is the reason. But you? You're the only thing keeping me sane through all of this." "I don't understand." "I know you don't. Because you still think this is a transaction. You think I'm keeping you around out of obligation or pride or some strategic calculation. But Evelyn," his voice cracked slightly, "you're not a business decision anymore. He stopped, couldn't say it, because saying it would make it real, would make him vulnerable in a way he'd spent his entire life learning to avoid. Evelyn crossed the room, stood in front of him, close enough to see the exhaustion etched into every line of his face. "I'm what?" she whispered. Adrian's hands came up to frame her face. The touch was gentle despite the tension vibrating through him. "You're the only person I trust, the only person who doesn't want something from me. And if you leave, I don't know if I can survive what comes next." It wasn't a declaration of love, but it was honest, raw. The closest Adrian had come to admitting that somewhere between survival and strategy, he'd started to need her. And Evelyn realized with a sick certainty that she needed him too. Not because of the protection or the money or the stability he provided, but because he was the only person who saw her completely, saw her fear and her doubt and her rage, and didn't ask her to be smaller. "Okay," she said. "Okay, I won't leave. We'll fight this together." Adrian pulled her against him, held her like she was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting. They stood there in the expensive penthouse that had never felt like home, clinging to each other while everything burned around them. The truth came out 3 days later, not from the police or Adrian's investigators or any of the resources they'd thrown at the problem. It came from Marcus himself. He called Evelyn at 2 a.m. from the county jail. His voice was destroyed. "I need to tell you something." "What?" "The money, the deposits in my account. I lied about not knowing where they came from." Evelyn's blood went cold. "Marcus, what? I was gambling, online poker. I got in deep with some bad people. They said they'd kill me if I didn't pay them back. So when someone offered me an easy way to make money, I took it." "What someone?" "I don't know his name. He said he was a courier, that all I had to do was hold on to a package for a few days and I'd get paid. I thought it was just documents or something corporate. I swear I didn't know it was drugs." Evelyn felt the ground drop out from under her. "You took money to hold drugs?" "I didn't know. He said it was a corporate package. I thought it was industrial espionage or something, white-collar stuff. I was desperate, Evie. I owed 70 grand. They were threatening Mom. I didn't know what else to do." "So you committed a felony." "I made a mistake. A stupid, terrible mistake. But I'm not a dealer. I didn't sell anything. I just held a package, and then it was gone, and I thought it was over." "When was this?" 2 months ago. Before the marriage, before Adrian, before any of this. Marcus had been in trouble this whole time and never said a word. Had let Evelyn sacrifice herself to pay off their father's debt while he was drowning in his own. "Does Mom know?" Evelyn asked. "No, nobody knows, just you." "And Dad?" Silence. Too long. "Marcus, does Dad know?" "He's the one who gave me the contact. He said it was safe, that lots of people did courier work for extra cash." The revelation hit like a freight train. Their father hadn't just gambled away the family business. He'd been involved in something criminal, had dragged Marcus into it, had let his own son take the fall while Evelyn destroyed her life trying to save them all. "I'm sorry," Marcus sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I should have told you, but I was scared. And then you married Adrian, and I thought maybe it would all just go away." Evelyn hung up. She sat there in the dark with her phone in her hand, feeling something fundamental break inside her. Her family wasn't the victim. They were the problem. Her father was a criminal who'd used his own son as a drug courier. Her brother was a coward who'd let her sacrifice everything while hiding his own guilt. And she'd fought Adrian about abandoning them, had accused him of being cold when he'd suggested cutting them loose. He'd been right all along. She found him in his office, still awake despite the hour, staring at financial reports he probably wasn't even seeing. "Marcus confessed," she said from the doorway. Adrian looked up, saw her face, set down the papers. "Tell me." She told him everything. The gambling debt, the courier job, their father's involvement, every sickening detail. When she finished, Adrian was quiet for a long time. "I'm sorry," he finally said. "For what?" "For being right. I know you wanted them to be innocent. They're not innocent. They're users. They used me. Let me marry you to save them when they were guilty the whole time." "What do you want to do?" Evelyn looked at him. At this man who'd given her everything despite having every reason not to, who'd fought for her family even when he'd known they weren't worth it, who'd stood between her and destruction again and again, and she realized what she had to do. "I want to cut them loose," she said quietly. "All of them. My father, my brother, my mother for enabling them. I want them out of our lives." "Evelyn, you were right. They're drowning me. They've been drowning me my whole life, and I was too loyal to see it. But I see it now." Adrian stood and crossed to her. "If you do this, there's no going back. You'll lose your family. I already lost them. I just didn't know it yet. You might regret this. Or I might finally be free." She looked up at him, at the man who'd become more family in 3 months than the people she'd spent 23 years trying to save. "Help me," she whispered. "Help me be strong enough to let them go." Adrian pulled her close. "I will. Whatever you need." That night, Evelyn made the calls. She told her mother she was done, told her father she knew about the gambling and the courier scheme, and she wanted nothing to do with him. Told Marcus his lawyer would continue to defend him, but she wouldn't be visiting, wouldn't be taking calls, wouldn't be there when he got out. She was done saving people who refused to save themselves. It should have felt liberating. Instead, it felt like tearing off her own skin. But Adrian held her through it, and when the calls were over and she collapsed into sobs that felt like they'd never stop, he just held her tighter. "You did the right thing," he murmured against her hair. "Then why does it hurt so much?" "Because you're not like them. You actually care." And somewhere in the pain and the rage and the grief, Evelyn felt something shift. The last chains holding her to people who'd never deserved her loyalty finally breaking. She was free. She was destroyed. And she was more herself than she'd ever been. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Her mother called 30 times before Evelyn blocked her number. Her father showed up at the penthouse and was turned away by security. Marcus sent letters from jail that Evelyn burned without reading. The press had a field day. Evelyn Whitmore abandons family in crisis. Cold-hearted heiress turns her back on troubled brother. The narrative wrote itself and she became the villain. The board saw an opportunity. They called another meeting. This time Adrian didn't fight them when they suggested divorce, because Evelyn had already decided. She sat in Adrian's office the night before the meeting and laid it out clinically. "If we divorce, you get your stability back. The board stops questioning your judgment. You can rebuild without me being a liability." "No." "Adrian," I said no. "Why?" "I'm offering you an out. Take it." "Because I don't want an out. I want you." The words hung in the air between them, naked, undeniable. Evelyn's throat tightened. "You can't mean that." "I mean it more than anything I've said in my entire life. I've destroyed everything you built. You've made it worth building." She stared at him, at this man who'd married her out of necessity, and somehow along the way had started looking at her like she was the only person who mattered. "When did this happen?" she whispered. "I don't know. Somewhere between you forcing me to eat dinner and holding me while I fell apart. Somewhere between survival and actually living. This wasn't supposed to happen. We had boundaries. We had rules. I don't care about rules anymore." Adrian crossed to her, cupped her face in his hands. "I love you," he said simply. "I don't know when it started or how to stop it, but I love you and I'm not letting you go. Not for the board, not for your family, not for anything." Evelyn felt tears spill over. "I love you too." God, I love you so much it terrifies me. Then marry me again. We're already married. Not like this. Not as strangers fulfilling obligations. Marry me because you choose me, because I choose you, because we survived hell together and came out stronger. It was insane. They'd been married for 3 months and barely knew each other. They'd been thrust together by desperation and circumstance. Nothing about this made sense, but sense didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that in the middle of losing everything, they'd found each other. Okay, Evelyn said. Okay? Ask me properly. Adrian smiled, actually smiled. Then he dropped to one knee right there in his office with no ring and no plan. Evelyn Carter Whitmore, will you marry me again? Not because we have to, but because I can't imagine surviving another day without you. Yes. He stood and kissed her, deep and desperate and real in a way their first kiss had never been. Outside the windows, the city glittered on, indifferent to the small human drama of two people falling in love in the ruins of everything they'd built. The board meeting the next day was Adrian's Waterloo, or his victory. He didn't know which yet. He walked in with Evelyn beside him. She wore a black suit that made her look like armor. Her chin was up, her spine straight. She looked like someone who'd been through fire and came out steel. The board stared. What is she doing here? Richard Sato asked. She's my wife. She stays. Adrian, this is highly irregular. I don't care. You wanted to discuss my marriage. She gets a say. Richard's expression tightened, but he nodded. Very well. The board is convened to address the ongoing crisis surrounding your family connections. Specifically, your brother-in-law's arrest and the negative press affecting company reputation. Understood. We believe the best course of action is dissolution of your marriage to distance the company from... No. Adrian, I said no. My marriage is not subject to board approval. If you have concerns about company reputation, we address them through PR strategy and legal action, not by destroying my personal life. Your personal life is affecting our bottom line. Then we improve the bottom line. I've brought proposals for 3 new revenue streams that will offset any losses from negative press. I've secured commitments from investors who believe in our long-term vision, and I've negotiated settlements with the suppliers who backed out during the Chen crisis. The company is stronger than it's been in months. He slid folders across the table, hard evidence that he'd been working while they'd been panicking. The board members opened them. Read. Their expressions shifted. This is impressive, one of them admitted grudgingly. It's what I do. I solve problems. I build things. And I do it better when I'm not constantly defending my personal choices to people who should be focused on their own jobs. Richard cleared his throat. Nevertheless, the optics. The optics are that I'm a man who stands by his commitments, who doesn't abandon his wife when things get hard. That's the kind of leader people respect, not someone who cuts and runs at the first sign of trouble. Your wife's family is no longer relevant. She's cut ties with them. They have no connection to this company or to us. So unless the board wants to make an issue of my personal life for purely vindictive reasons, I suggest we move on to actual business. The room was silent. Then Richard Sato did something unexpected. He smiled. Well played, Adrian. You've learned from your father, after all. I learned what not to do from my father. This is me doing it better. Richard nodded slowly. Then he looked at the other board members. I move that we table the discussion of Adrian's personal life and focus on these new revenue proposals. All in favor? One by one, hands went up. Adrian had won, not by being ruthless like his father, but by being stubborn, by refusing to sacrifice what mattered for what was easy, by choosing love over survival. The meeting ended. The board members filed out. Adrian and Evelyn stood there in the empty conference room with sunlight streaming through the windows. You did it, Evelyn said quietly. We did it. They could have destroyed you. They tried, but I had something they didn't. What? Adrian turned to face her. A reason to fight. You made this worth fighting for. Evelyn felt tears prick her eyes again. I love you. I know. That's why we're going to make it. And standing there in the ruins of everything they'd thought their lives would be, they started building something new, something chosen, something real. But neither of them knew that Vincent Cross was standing in the lobby 30 floors below, having just paid off a security guard to get access to the building. He had a gun in his coat pocket and nothing left to lose. He'd tried manipulation. He'd tried legal destruction. Now he was going to try something more direct. And when the elevator doors opened on the executive floor, Adrian and Evelyn would have exactly 30 seconds to decide if love was worth dying for. The elevator chimed. Adrian and Evelyn were still standing in the conference room, fingers intertwined, when they heard it. A sound so ordinary it should have meant nothing. But something in the quality of the silence that followed made Adrian's spine go rigid. He'd spent his entire life learning to read danger in boardrooms where threats wore suits and spoke in measured tones. Violence wasn't supposed to exist in these spaces. But the air had changed, gone sharp and wrong. "Stay behind me," he said quietly. "What? Now?" Evelyn moved without argument. She'd learned to trust his instincts the same way he'd learned to trust hers. When Adrian Whitmore's voice went cold and flat like that, something was coming. The conference room door was still open. Through it, they could see the executive floor reception area. Empty. The assistants had gone to lunch. Security was stationed in the lobby 30 floors down, not up here where the real power lived behind locked doors and bulletproof glass. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Slow. Deliberate. The walk of someone who wasn't afraid of being caught. Adrian's hand went to his phone. He pulled up the security app, checked the camera feeds. His blood went ice cold. Vincent Cross was walking down the executive hallway with his right hand buried in his coat pocket. The bulge was unmistakable. A weapon. And he was heading straight for them. "He's here," Adrian breathed. Evelyn looked at the phone. Her face went white. "How did he get past security? Money? Bribery? Doesn't matter." Adrian's mind was already calculating exits, weapons, options. The conference room had one door, floor-to-ceiling windows that didn't open, furniture that could maybe provide cover but wouldn't stop a bullet. They were trapped. He pulled Evelyn toward the far corner, positioned his body between her and the door. His heart was slamming against his ribs, but his hands were steady. Fear was just information. You either used it or let it destroy you. "Call 911, he told her. "Adrian, do it. Now." She pulled out her phone with shaking hands, started dialing. The footsteps stopped outside the conference room. Vincent Cross appeared in the doorway. He looked worse than the photos Adrian's investigators had compiled. Mid-50s, but aged by bitterness and whatever substances he'd been using to cope with his fall from grace. His eyes were bloodshot, his face gaunt, his clothes expensive but rumpled. A man who'd once had everything and lost it all. And in his hand, now visible, was a Glock 9mm. "Well," Cross said. His voice was hoarse, almost conversational. "Here we are." Adrian didn't move. "You don't want to do this, Vincent." "Don't I? You destroyed my life, took away the last chance I had to rebuild. Chen was going to make me rich again. We were going to take your company apart and sell it for pieces. But you had to play hero, had to prove you were smarter than everyone else. Chen was stealing from the company. I protected my people." "Your people?" Cross laughed. It sounded broken. "You don't have people, Adrian. You have assets, tools you use until they break, just like your father." The comparison hit harder than it should have, because there was truth in it. Adrian had spent months terrified of becoming his father, ruthless, cold, willing to sacrifice anything for control. But he'd changed. Evelyn had changed him, or maybe she'd just shown him who he could choose to be. "You're right," Adrian said quietly. "I was like him, but not anymore. Too late for redemption. You ruined me, turned the SEC loose on my investors, made sure I'd never work in this city again. So now I'm going to ruin you." The gun rose, pointed at Adrian's chest. Behind him, Adrian heard Evelyn's voice, low and urgent, giving their location to the 911 operator. Too far away. Even if police were dispatched immediately, they wouldn't arrive in time. This was going to end in the next 60 seconds, one way or another. "Vincent," Adrian said. His voice was calm despite the adrenaline screaming through his system. "Shooting me doesn't fix your problems. It just adds murder to your list. I don't care anymore. You took everything from me. My reputation, my money, my future. What's left? Prison? Poverty? I'd rather go out making sure you don't get to enjoy your victory. Then shoot me. But let her go first." Evelyn made a sound of protest behind him. Adrian ignored it. Cross's eyes shifted to Evelyn. Something ugly moved across his face. The wife. The precious Evelyn Carter who married up and forgot where she came from. Did you know your family offered to help me? Your father was ready to testify against Adrian if it meant saving his own skin. Evelyn went very still. You're lying. Am I? Check your email. I sent you the recordings yesterday. Your father begging me to use his testimony as leverage. Your mother suggesting you divorce Adrian if the price was right. They were willing to sell you out for their own survival. Adrian felt Evelyn flinch behind him, the betrayal cutting deep even though they'd already cut ties with her family. Because knowing your parents would abandon you and hearing proof were different kinds of pain. It doesn't matter, Evelyn said. Her voice was stronger than Adrian expected. They're not my family anymore. He is. She moved to stand beside Adrian. He tried to push her back, but she planted her feet. If you're going to shoot him, you shoot me first, she said. Evelyn, no. Shut up, Adrian. I'm not hiding while someone threatens you. Cross stared at them. At this couple who'd been strangers 4 months ago, now standing together ready to die rather than abandon each other. Something in his expression shifted. Not softening, just recognition. The terrible understanding that they had something he'd never possessed. Love, Cross said bitterly. You actually fell in love. That's almost funny. It's the only thing that matters, Evelyn said. It won't save you. It already has. The gun steadied. Cross's finger tightened on the trigger. Adrian could see the exact moment the man made his decision. Could see death coming with cold inevitability. Time slowed. Adrian's mind fragmented into 1,000 calculations. Distances, angles, probability of survival if he rushed Cross, probability of Evelyn getting shot if he didn't. There were no good options, just bad and worse. So he chose the one that kept her alive. He lunged, 15 feet between them. Too far. He knew it even as his body moved. But maybe Cross would hesitate. Maybe the shot would miss. Maybe... The gun fired. Sound exploded in the enclosed space, a crack so loud it felt physical. Adrian's momentum carried him forward even as pain bloomed in his left shoulder. Not center mass, not lethal. Just searing agony that told him he'd been hit but not stopped. He crashed into Cross. They went down in a tangle of limbs. Adrian's shoulder screamed, but he ignored it, fighting for control of the weapon. His right hand locked around Cross's wrist, forcing the gun away. Cross was stronger than he looked, wiry and desperate with the strength of someone who'd already decided to die. They rolled. Adrian slammed Cross's hand against the floor once, twice. The gun skittered away. Behind them, Evelyn was screaming. Adrian didn't have time to process it. Cross's fist connected with his injured shoulder and white light exploded behind his eyes. He tasted blood. His vision swam, but he didn't let go. Because letting go meant Cross could reach the gun. Meant Evelyn could get hurt. And that was unacceptable. Adrian would die before he let that happen. He drove his knee into Cross's ribs. Heard something crack. Cross howled, and his grip loosened. Adrian tore free and scrambled toward the gun. His fingers closed around it just as Cross grabbed his ankle and yanked. Adrian hit the ground hard. His injured shoulder shrieked. The gun was in his hand, but Cross was climbing on top of him, hands reaching for his throat, fingers pressed into his windpipe. Adrian couldn't breathe. Black spots danced across his vision. He brought the gun up, pressed it against Cross's ribs. Let go or I fire. Cross's hands tightened. His face was twisted with hate and desperation and the kind of madness that came from having nothing left to lose. Do it, Cross rasped. Kill me. Prove you're just like your father. Adrian's finger rested on the trigger. 1 pound of pressure. That's all it would take. End this threat. Protect Evelyn. Survive. But his father would have pulled that trigger without hesitation. Would have killed Cross and slept soundly knowing he'd eliminated a problem. Adrian wasn't his father. No, he choked out. He pistol-whipped Cross across the temple instead. The man went limp. Adrian shoved him off and rolled onto his back, gasping for air. His shoulder was bleeding badly, blood soaking through his suit. The room spun. His ears were ringing from the gunshot. Everything hurt. But he was alive. Then Evelyn was there, her hands on his face, her voice cutting through the fog. Adrian, stay with me. Oh God, you're bleeding so much. I'm I'm okay. You're shot. Shoulder. Not fatal. He tried to sit up. Failed. Cross? Unconscious. I kicked the gun away. Her hands were shaking as she pressed them against his wound, trying to stop the bleeding. The police are coming. Just hold on. Always so bossy, Adrian murmured. Shut up. Don't you dare die on me. Wouldn't dream of it. But his vision was going gray at the edges. Blood loss, shock. His body was shutting down systems to preserve core functions. He recognized the signs from the trauma training his security team had made him take. Evelyn, he said. His voice sounded far away. What? I need you to know. Don't. Don't do the goodbye speech. You're not dying. Let me finish. He grabbed her hand with his good arm, squeezed hard. I need you to know that marrying you was the best decision I ever made. Even like this, even bleeding out on a conference room floor, I'd do it all again. Tears were streaming down her face. You're an idiot. Probably. I love you. I know. That's why I'm not dying. Too much to live for now. He meant it. For the first time in his life, Adrian Whitmore had something worth surviving for that wasn't obligation or legacy or family expectations. He had someone who saw him completely, the cold calculation and the buried warmth, the ruthlessness and the capacity for love he'd spent years denying, and chose him anyway. That was worth fighting for. That was worth bleeding for. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Do Ashos. The hospital was antiseptic white and artificial light. Adrian woke up in a private room with an IV in his arm and bandages wrapped around his shoulder. The surgery had taken 4 hours. The bullet had shattered his clavicle but missed major arteries. They'd repaired the bone with a metal plate. He'd recover fully with physical therapy. Lucky, the doctor said. Adrian didn't feel lucky. He felt like he'd been hit by a truck. Evelyn was asleep in the chair beside his bed, her hand wrapped around his. She looked exhausted. There were bloodstains on her suit, his blood, and her hair was a mess. But she was there, had stayed through the entire surgery, refused to leave even when the nurses suggested she go home and rest. Adrian watched her sleep and felt something in his chest expand. Love wasn't supposed to be this terrifying, this all-consuming, but it was, and he wouldn't trade it for anything. Her eyes opened, found his immediately. Hey, she said softly. Hey, how do you feel? Like I got shot. That's because you did, you idiot. But she was smiling through fresh tears. What were you thinking, rushing him like that? I was thinking he was about to shoot you. He was aiming at you. I couldn't risk it. If there was even a chance he'd turn the gun on you, Adrian's voice went rough. I'd take a bullet for you every time, no hesitation. Evelyn pressed her forehead against his good shoulder. You're insane. About you? Completely. They sat like that for a long moment. Two people who'd been thrust together by circumstance and desperation, who'd fought their way through family betrayals and corporate warfare and actual violence, and somehow come out the other side more whole than when they started. What happened to Cross? Adrian asked. He's in custody. They're charging him with attempted murder, assault with a deadly weapon, a dozen other things. He's going away for a long time. Good. The board called. They want to issue a statement about you being a hero. Turn this into a PR win. Adrian's laugh turned into a wince as pain shot through his shoulder. Of course they do. Richard Sato also called. He said you handled the situation with remarkable restraint, that your father would have killed Cross and the board respects that you didn't. My father would have made sure Cross never got close enough to try. Maybe, but you made a different choice. A better one. Adrian wasn't sure about that. His shoulder was screaming, and he'd almost gotten both of them killed. But he was alive. They were both alive. And Cross was in custody. That counted as a win. What about your family? He asked carefully. Evelyn's expression shuddered. My father tried to visit. Security turned him away. He's been calling, but I blocked his number. My mother sent flowers with a card begging for forgiveness. I threw them out. And Marcus? His lawyer called. The prosecution offered a plea deal, 5 years with possibility of parole in 3. He took it. 5 years. Adrian's chest tightened. Marcus was 19. He'd be 24 when he got out, half his 20s gone because he'd made desperate choices and trusted the wrong people. "I'm sorry," Adrian said. "Don't be. He made his choices. I made mine. We all live with the consequences." But her voice was hollow, because cutting off your family didn't mean you stopped feeling the loss. It just meant you chose to survive despite it. "Come here," Adrian said. Evelyn carefully climbed onto the hospital bed beside him, mindful of his injuries. She curled against his good side, her head on his chest. Adrian wrapped his arm around her and held on. "We're going to be okay," he murmured. "You almost died." "But I didn't. What if next time there won't be a next time? Cross was the last threat. Everyone else is handled." "How can you be sure?" "Because I've eliminated every enemy who had the means and motive to come after us. Chen's in federal prison. Cross is in custody. The board is finally backing me. Your family is cut off. We're safe." Evelyn pressed closer. "Promise me something." "Anything." "Promise me you'll never rush a man with a gun again." "Can't promise that. If someone threatens you, Adrian." "Okay, I promise I'll try to find less suicidal ways to protect you. How's that?" "I guess it'll have to do." They lay there in the sterile hospital room, wrapped around each other, and for the first time in months, the future didn't look like a battlefield. It looked like possibility, like choice, like freedom. Adrian was released 3 days later. The press was waiting outside the hospital. Cameras and reporters, and the feeding frenzy that came with a story this good. Corporate heir survives assassination attempt. Wife stands by his side. It was the kind of narrative that sold papers and generated clicks. Adrian hated every second of it. But he stood there with Evelyn beside him and gave a brief statement because that's what the board needed. That's what the company required. He played the part of the brave leader who'd faced down danger and emerged victorious. What he didn't mention was the nightmares. The way he woke up gasping, feeling Cross's hands around his throat. The phantom pain in his shoulder that had nothing to do with the injury and everything to do with reliving those seconds when he'd thought they were both going to die. You could survive violence and still be destroyed by it. Adrian was learning that the hard way. But Evelyn was there, and that made it bearable. They went back to this penthouse. James drove them, watching the mirrors with professional paranoia. Additional security had been hired, 2 more guards who rotated shifts, ensuring the building was protected 24/7. The penthouse felt different now, less like a cage and more like a sanctuary. They'd survived here, built something real here. The space had absorbed their transformation from strangers to partners to something that didn't have an easy name. Love was too simple a word. What they had was forged in fire and blood, and the kind of desperate choices that either destroyed you or made you unbreakable. They'd chosen unbreakable. Adrian's recovery was slow. The physical therapy was brutal, relearning how to move his shoulder without screaming, rebuilding strength in muscles that had been shredded by a bullet. His therapist was a sadist who disguised torture as healing, but Evelyn was there for every session, driving him when he couldn't manage it himself, sitting in the waiting room, reminding him why he was fighting to recover. The board meetings continued. Adrian went back to work 2 weeks after the shooting, against doctor's orders. He couldn't afford to show weakness. Not now when everything was finally stabilizing. Richard Sato pulled him aside after one particularly contentious meeting. "You're pushing too hard," Richard said. "I'm fine. You're barely healed. The board understands if you need more time. The board will see any absence as weakness. I can't give them that opening." Richard studied him. "Your father used to say the same thing. Worked himself into an early grave because he couldn't delegate. Couldn't trust anyone else to handle the load." "I'm not my father." "Then prove it. Let your executives handle some of the day-to-day. Focus on recovery. Trust that the company won't collapse without you micromanaging every detail." Adrian wanted to argue, wanted to insist he was indispensable, but the exhaustion was bone deep, and for the first time he had something more important than work waiting at home, someone who mattered more than quarterly earnings or board approval or legacy preservation. "Okay," he said. Richard blinked. "Okay? I'll delegate more, but I'm not disappearing. I'll still be involved in major decisions. That's all we're asking." It should have felt like surrender. Instead, it felt like evolution. Learning that strength wasn't just about carrying everything alone. Sometimes it was about letting others help shoulder the weight. His father would have seen it as weakness. Adrian saw it as survival. Peace. 6 weeks after the shooting, Evelyn suggested they leave the city for a weekend. We need distance, she said, from the company, the press, all of it. Just us and some space to breathe. Adrian wanted to refuse. There was always more work, more problems, more threats that needed monitoring. But when he looked at Evelyn, really looked at her, he saw the exhaustion, the weight of everything she'd survived. She'd cut off her family, stood by him through attempted murder, rebuilt her entire identity from scratch, and she'd done it with strength that astounded him. She needed a break. They both did. "Where do you want to go?" he asked. "Anywhere that isn't here." They ended up at a cabin upstate, 3 hours from the city, surrounded by woods and silence and air that didn't taste like exhaust and ambition. No security except James, who stayed in a separate cabin 50 yards away and only checked in twice a day. It was terrifying, being this exposed, this vulnerable, but it was also liberating. They spent the first day doing nothing, just sitting on the porch, drinking coffee, watching the trees move in wind that didn't care about board meetings or stock prices or family betrayals. "I forgot what quiet sounds like," Evelyn said. "Same. Do you think we'll ever have normal lives?" "Define normal." "I don't know. Boring, predictable. No one trying to kill us." Adrian smiled. "That would be new. Would you want that? A boring life?" He considered it. 6 months ago, he would have said no. Boredom meant stagnation. It meant weakness. But now, sitting here with Evelyn warm against his side, the possibility didn't sound terrible. "Maybe," he admitted, "if I was bored with you." "That's the corniest thing you've ever said." "I know. Don't tell the board. They'll think the shooting damaged my brain." Evelyn laughed. The sound was so pure and unexpected it made Adrian's chest ache. When had he last heard her laugh like that? Really laugh, not the careful social noise she made at company events. "We should do this more," he said. "What? Hide in the woods? Take breaks. Remember we're human, not just roles we're playing." "Is that what we've been doing? Playing roles?" Adrian pulled her closer. "We were, at the beginning, but not anymore. This is real. Even the part where you got shot protecting me?" "Especially that part." Evelyn tilted her head to look up at him. Her eyes were dark and serious. "I don't know if I can forgive you for that yet, for risking yourself." "I'd do it again." "I know. That's what scares me." "Evelyn, let me finish." She sat up, turning to face him fully. "You said you're not your father, that you've changed. But then you do something like rushing a gunman, and I wonder if you've just redirected the self-destruction. Your father worked himself to death. You're willing to die protecting me. Both versions end with you gone." The observation hit hard because it was true. Adrian had spent so long avoiding his father's specific mistakes that he hadn't noticed he was making different versions of the same error, sacrificing himself, just for different reasons. "What do you want me to do?" he asked quietly. "I want you to survive, not just physically. I want you to build a life that's worth living, not just worth dying for." "I'm trying." "I know, but trying isn't enough. You need to actually do it." Adrian looked at her, at this woman who'd been forced into his life by circumstance and had somehow become the only person who saw him clearly enough to call him on his bullshit. "Help me," he said. "How?" "I don't know. You figured out how to cut toxic people out of your life, how to choose survival over loyalty. Teach me how to do that with my own self-destructive instincts." "That's a terrible idea. I'm barely holding myself together." "Then we'll hold each other together." "Is that how this works?" "I think so. We're making it up as we go." Evelyn smiled, sad but real. "Okay, we'll figure it out." They spent the rest of the weekend in that cabin, learning how to be people instead of survivors. They cooked meals together, took walks through the woods, talked about futures that didn't involve constant crisis management. It should have been boring. Instead, it was the most alive Adrian had felt in years. On their last night, they sat by the fire pit outside the cabin, watching stars appear in a sky too dark for city eyes to understand. The silence was comfortable now. Not the tense quiet of people afraid to say the wrong thing, but the ease of two people who'd earned the right to exist together without performance. "Thank you," Evelyn said suddenly. "For what?" "For marrying me." I know it wasn't your choice at first, but thank you for staying, for choosing me even when you didn't have to. Adrian took her hand. You saved my life long before Cross pulled that trigger. You just did it slowly, by refusing to let me disappear into work and obligation and all the things I used to think mattered. They still matter. But they're not the only things, and they're not worth more than this. He gestured at the space between them, the complicated, hard-won connection they'd built from nothing. Evelyn leaned in and kissed him, slow and deep and certain. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright. I love you, she said. I love you too. Simple words, but they carried the weight of everything they'd survived, everything they'd chosen, everything they were still building. They returned to the city Monday morning. Adrian's phone exploded with messages the moment they hit cell service. 37 emails, 14 missed calls, a dozen texts from board members and executives. Something had happened. He scrolled through the messages, his stomach sinking with each one. What's wrong? Evelyn asked. Adrian looked at her, at the woman who'd just spent 3 days teaching him how to be human again, who'd reminded him that survival wasn't just about winning battles, but about building lives worth living. And he realized he had a choice. He could dive back into crisis mode, could let whatever new disaster was brewing consume him the way every other problem had, could prove to the board and the company and himself that he was indispensable, or he could trust that he'd built something strong enough to withstand his absence, could delegate, could let others handle the immediate fire while he preserved what actually mattered. He put the phone away. Adrian? Evelyn's voice was careful. What's happening? I don't know, and right now, I don't care. The board can wait until I'm back in the office. Whatever it is, it survived the weekend. It can survive another 2 hours. Evelyn stared at him. Who are you, and what did you do with my husband? Your husband is learning that some things are more important than being the first person to fix every crisis. Like what? Like arriving home with you, having breakfast together, not letting work destroy the first peace we've had in months. It was a small choice, seemingly insignificant, but it was also a fundamental shift in how Adrian approached his life. For 31 years, he'd been taught that personal needs came second to professional obligations, that being a leader meant sacrificing everything else. But leaders who sacrificed everything ended up with nothing worth leading for. His father had learned that too late. Adrian was determined to learn it in time. They drove home in comfortable silence, had breakfast at the penthouse. Adrian checked his phone once, saw the messages were about a potential investor backing out and a supplier issue that procurement could handle. Not a crisis, just business. He responded with brief instructions delegating both issues to the appropriate executives, then put the phone away and focused on Evelyn, on building the life they'd promised each other in that cabin, on choosing to be human instead of just successful. It should have felt impossible. Every instinct screamed at him to dive into work, to prove he was still in control, to be the leader everyone expected. But Evelyn was smiling at him across the breakfast table, and that smile was worth more than any quarterly earnings report. He'd survived a bullet. Now he was learning to survive peace. The relative calm lasted exactly 8 days. Adrian was in his office reviewing contracts when his assistant knocked urgently. Mr. Whitmore, you need to see this. She handed him her tablet. On the screen was a news article from a major financial publication. The headline made his blood freeze. Whitmore Industries board member accused of embezzlement, Richard Sato under federal investigation. Adrian read the article twice, then a third time, each word hitting like a physical blow. Richard Sato, the board's lead director, the man who'd guided Adrian through his father's death and the subsequent crisis. The person Adrian had trusted most in the company, accused of embezzling over $20 million through a complex scheme involving shell corporations and falsified expense reports. The investigation had been ongoing for months. Federal prosecutors were preparing to file charges, and they were questioning whether Adrian had known, whether he'd been complicit. His phone rang. The board's attorney. Adrian, we need to talk immediately. I didn't know, Adrian said. That's what we need to prove. Because right now the SEC is looking at everyone in leadership, including you. The room spun. This was impossible. Richard had been his ally, his mentor, the one person on the board who'd consistently defended Adrian's decisions. How had he missed this? Meeting in 1 hour, the attorney said. Conference room. Bring your personal lawyer. This is going to get ugly. The line went dead. Adrian sat there staring at nothing, feeling the ground dissolve beneath him again. He'd just started believing they were safe, that the crisis was over, that they could finally build something stable. He should have known better. His office door opened. Evelyn walked in, took one look at his face, and closed the door behind her. What happened? He showed her the article. She read it. Her expression went from confused to horrified to coldly furious in the span of 30 seconds. Richard? The man who pushed for us to get divorced? Who questioned every decision you made? The same. The man who was orchestrating everything from the inside to make you look unstable so he could... Evelyn stopped. Her eyes went wide. Oh God. Chen, the hostile takeover. Cross? What if Richard was behind all of it? Adrian's mind raced through the connections. Richard had introduced Chen to key investors. Richard had access to every board discussion and company secret. Richard had known about the Carter family's debt and suggested the marriage arrangement. Richard had positioned himself as Adrian's ally while systematically creating crises that would either destroy Adrian or force him to make decisions that looked weak. He's been playing me from the beginning, Adrian said quietly. Not just you, all of us. But why? Money, power, revenge for your father bypassing him for CEO when he thought he deserved it. Does it matter? He nearly got you killed and now he's trying to take you down with him. Adrian stood. His shoulder throbbed, a reminder of how close they'd come to destruction, of how much they'd already survived. This ends now, he said. How? I don't know yet, but I'm not letting him destroy what we built, not after everything. He grabbed his phone and started making calls. To his lawyer, to the investigators who'd helped with the Chen case, to every ally he had left in the company. If Richard Sato wanted a war, he'd get one. But this time, Adrian wasn't fighting alone. He had Evelyn. He had resources. He had the hard-won knowledge that survival meant being willing to do whatever it took to protect what mattered. And what mattered was standing beside him, ready to fight. Tell me what you need, Evelyn said. Adrian looked at his wife, his partner, the woman who'd walked into his life as a transaction and become the only thing worth protecting. I need you to help me prove I'm innocent, because if the SEC thinks I was involved in Richard's scheme, they'll destroy everything. The company, our reputation, us. Then we prove it. We dig through every record, every transaction, every communication. We show them exactly how Richard manipulated everyone, including you. That could take weeks, and Richard has had years to cover his tracks. Then we don't dig through the past. We make him confess in the present. Adrian stared at her. What are you suggesting? A trap. The same way we got Chen. We make Richard think he's won, that you're going down and he's safe. And when he gets comfortable enough to gloat, we record everything. It was risky, possibly illegal depending on how they executed it, and it required Adrian to be willing to look defeated, to let Richard think he'd succeeded in destroying him. Everything in Adrian rebelled against that. He'd spent his entire life projecting strength, refusing to show weakness. The idea of deliberately appearing broken went against every instinct he had. But he'd learned something in the past 4 months. Sometimes the strongest thing you could do was look weak. Sometimes survival meant being willing to sacrifice your pride for a larger victory. His father would have fought Richard head-on, hired lawyers and investigators, and waged war through official channels. And he probably would have lost because Richard was too smart to leave obvious evidence. Adrian had to be smarter than his father, more adaptable, willing to use strategies the old man would have despised. Okay, he said. Let's set the trap. They spent the next week building their case. Adrian played the part of a man slowly being crushed by the weight of investigation. He looked exhausted at board meetings, let his composure slip, made small mistakes that suggested he was cracking under pressure. The board watched him with vulture eyes, waiting for collapse. Richard played concerned mentor, offered support, suggested Adrian take time off, let others handle the crisis while he recovered from the shooting and now this new accusation. It was masterful manipulation, and if Adrian hadn't known what to look for, he would have missed it entirely. But Evelyn saw it. She watched Richard from the gallery during board meetings, taking notes on every suggestion, every concerned glance, every perfectly calculated show of support that was really undermining. He's positioning himself to take over, she told Adrian after one particularly brutal meeting. He's making you look unstable, so the board will ask you to step down temporarily, and once you're gone, he'll make sure you never come back. How long until the federal investigation moves on me directly? Days? Maybe a week if we're lucky. Not enough time. Adrian made a decision, a desperate one, the kind his father would have despised. He called Richard directly. I need to meet with you, privately, tonight. Richard's voice was perfectly calibrated concern. Of course. My office? No, somewhere neutral, the Harbor Club, 8 p.m. Adrian, if this is about the investigation, it's about everything. I need advice. You're the only one I trust. The lie tasted like ash. But Richard took the bait. I'll be there. Adrian hung up and looked at Evelyn. This is it. Tonight I either get him to confess or we lose everything. You'll get him. You're smarter than he thinks. Am I? Yes, because he thinks you're your father. Predictable, rigid, unable to adapt. But you're not. You're better. Adrian pulled her close, kissed her hard. If this goes wrong, it won't. But if it does, if I end up indicted and the company collapses and we lose everything, then we'll survive that too. We've survived everything else. Her certainty steadied him. This woman who'd been forced into his life and had become his anchor, his reason, his proof that some things were worth fighting for even when the odds were impossible. I love you, he said. I know. Now go destroy him. The Harbor Club was old money and older traditions. Adrian arrived early, secured a private dining room, and had James sweep it for recording devices. Clean. Then he set up his own recording equipment, tiny microphones hidden in his watch and cufflinks, a backup device in his phone, everything transmitting to a secure server Evelyn monitored from the car outside. If this worked, they'd have audio evidence of whatever Richard revealed. If it didn't, Adrian would be walking into a confrontation with a man who'd orchestrated his near death and was now trying to frame him for federal crimes. Either way, it ended tonight. Richard arrived exactly on time, impeccably dressed, perfectly composed, the picture of a concerned colleague ready to support a struggling leader. They sat. Ordered drinks neither of them touched. Thank you for meeting me, Adrian started. I know things have been difficult lately. You're under enormous pressure, I understand. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like everything I've built is falling apart and I don't know how to stop it. Richard leaned forward, sympathetic. The investigation will clear you. You haven't done anything wrong. Haven't I? I trusted Chen. I trusted the suppliers who backed out. I trusted you to guide me, and look where we are. Maybe the board is right. Maybe I'm not ready to lead. Don't say that. Why not? It's true. My father would have seen this coming. He would have known about your embezzlement before the feds did. The words hung in the air. Adrian watched Richard's face carefully, looking for the tell. The moment the mask slipped, Richard went very still. What are you suggesting, Adrian? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating facts. You've been embezzling for years. Chen was your plant. Cross was your weapon. And now you're using the investigation to finally push me out so you can take control. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth. Richard smiled. It was cold, calculated, the expression of a man who'd been caught, but wasn't worried. Prove it, he said simply. I don't have to. The feds will do that. Will they? Because all the evidence points to you, Adrian. You're the one who approved the Shell Corporation contracts. You're the one who signed off on the expense reports. I made sure of it. Every document that matters has your signature, your approval, your fingerprints. There it was, the confession. Adrian kept his expression neutral even as his heart slammed against his ribs. So you admit it. I admit that I'm smarter than you, smarter than your father. I spent 30 years building this company alongside him, and what did I get? Passed over for CEO because I wasn't family. Watched you inherit everything despite having no vision, no spine, no ability to make the hard choices. So you decided to destroy me. I decided to take what should have been mine from the beginning, and I almost succeeded. Chen would have worked if you hadn't gotten lucky. Cross should have killed you, but even that failure worked in my favor because now you're traumatized, unstable, vulnerable. The board sees it. The investors see it. Everyone sees that Adrian Whitmore is breaking. And when I'm gone, I step in, restore order, save the company from the chaos you created, become the hero. It's perfect. Adrian's hands clenched under the table. Every word was being recorded. But Richard didn't know that. Didn't realize he'd just confessed to conspiracy, embezzlement, and attempted murder by proxy. There's just one problem, Adrian said quietly. What's that? I'm not my father, and I'm not breaking. Richard's smile faltered. What? Adrian stood, pulled out his phone, played back the last 2 minutes of their conversation. Richard's voice filled the room, admitting everything, confessing to crimes that would put him away for decades. You recorded me, Richard said flatly. I learned from the best. You taught me to always have insurance. That recording is inadmissible. I didn't consent. I don't need it to be admissible in court. I just need to play it for the board, for the investors, for everyone who's been questioning my leadership. They'll know exactly who's been destroying this company from the inside. Richard stood slowly, his composed mask finally cracking. You think you've won? I know I have. You've just made yourself a target. I have resources, connections, people who owe me favors. This doesn't end because you caught me on tape. You're right. It doesn't end here. The dining room door opened. Federal agents walked in, led by the prosecutor who'd been investigating the embezzlement. Richard Sato, you're under arrest. Richard's face went white. He looked at Adrian with pure hatred. You set me up. You set yourself up. I just gave you the rope. As the agents cuffed Richard and read him his rights, Adrian felt something settle in his chest. Not victory, not satisfaction, just the cold certainty that he'd done what needed doing. He'd protected what mattered, eliminated the threat, survived, just like his father would have. But unlike his father, he'd done it to build something worth preserving, not to accumulate power for its own sake. The agents led Richard out. The prosecutor stayed behind. That was well done, Mr. Whitmore. We'll need your full cooperation for the trial. You'll have it. And the recording. We'll need the original files, chain of custody requirements. Of course, my lawyer will coordinate. The prosecutor nodded and left. Adrian stood alone in the private dining room, adrenaline still singing through his system. He'd won. The threat was neutralized. The company was safe. But something felt hollow about it. Because Richard had been right about one thing. Adrian had just proven he could be as ruthless as his father when necessary. The question was whether he could live with that. Tsak. Evelyn was waiting outside. She saw his face and pulled him into her arms without a word. Did it work? She asked. Yes, they arrested him. It's over. Then why do you look like that? Like what? Like you just lost something instead of won. Adrian pulled back enough to meet her eyes. Because I realized something in there. I set a trap, manipulated him, recorded him without consent, used federal agents as my personal strike force. That's exactly what my father would have done. So I spent months trying not to become him. And the moment I needed to be ruthless, I became exactly what I was afraid of. Evelyn cupped his face, forced him to look at her. Listen to me. Your father would have destroyed Richard because it benefited him personally. You destroyed Richard because he was trying to kill you and frame you for crimes you didn't commit. That's not the same thing. Isn't it? No. Intent matters. Your father was ruthless for power. You're ruthless for survival. And more importantly, you're ruthless to protect the people you love. That's not weakness disguised as strength. That's just strength. Adrian wanted to believe her, wanted to accept that he could be calculating and manipulative when necessary without losing himself completely. What if I start to like it? He asked quietly. What if the next time it's easier? And the time after that? Then I'll stop you. That's why I'm here. To remind you who you are when you forget. To pull you back when you go too far. That's what partners do. Partners. Not just wife, not just ally. Partners in the deepest sense. Two people committed to keeping each other human in a world that rewarded monsters. Okay, Adrian said. Okay. I trust you. To stop me if I become something I shouldn't. Good. Because I will. Without hesitation. They stood there on the sidewalk outside the Harbor Club, wrapped around each other, while the city moved past them uncaring. Two people who'd survived everything and were still standing. "Let's go home," Evelyn said. "Home." I like the sound of that. Because somewhere in the past 4 months, the penthouse had stopped being a cage and started being exactly that. Home. The place where they could be themselves without performance. Where survival didn't mean constant warfare. Where love meant choosing each other every single day, despite everything. They walked to the car hand in hand. James drove them back to the penthouse. And for the first time since the wedding, Adrian felt like maybe they'd finally reached the other side of crisis. Maybe peace was actually possible. But what Adrian didn't know as they rode home in comfortable silence was that his phone held one unread message from an encrypted number. A message that would arrive at exactly midnight with a single line of text. Your father's debts weren't all financial, and now they've come due. The message would include coordinates to a warehouse on the waterfront and a photo of Evelyn taken that afternoon through a telephoto lens. The sender was someone Adrian's father had crossed 20 years ago. Someone patient enough to wait for the perfect moment to strike. And that moment had just arrived. The message arrived at midnight exactly. Adrian was already awake, staring at the ceiling while Evelyn slept beside him. Sleep had become a negotiation. His body lost more often than it won. The gunshot wound ached in weather changes. The nightmares came in waves. But tonight it was just restlessness. The feeling that peace was too fragile to trust. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. Unknown number. Encrypted. He almost ignored it. Almost rolled over and tried again for sleep. But something made him look. The message loaded slowly. Text first, then an image. Your father's debts weren't all financial, and now they've come due. Below it, coordinates to a waterfront warehouse, and a photograph of Evelyn taken that afternoon outside the Harbor Club, captured through a telephoto lens with the kind of professional clarity that made Adrian's blood freeze. Someone had been watching them, tracking them, waiting. He sat up carefully, trying not to wake Evelyn. Failed. "What's wrong?" Her voice was thick with sleep. "Nothing. Go back to bed." "Adrian?" She was awake now, reading his face in the dark. "What happened?" He showed her the message. Evelyn stared at the photo of herself. Her expression went from confused to frightened to coldly furious in seconds. She'd learned that progression from him. How to turn fear into fuel. "Who sent this?" "I don't know, but they know about my father, about debts that aren't financial." "What does that mean?" Adrian's mind was already racing through possibilities. His father had built an empire on questionable ethics and ruthless ambition. He'd made enemies, destroyed careers, ruined lives when it served his purposes. Adrian had spent months cleaning up the financial wreckage, but he'd never considered there might be other kinds of debts. Personal ones. The kind that couldn't be settled with money or legal maneuvering. The kind that required blood. "It means someone my father wronged is coming for payment," Adrian said quietly, "and they're using you as leverage." "So what do we do?" "I go to the warehouse. Alone. Find out what they want." "Absolutely not." "Evelyn, I said no. We're not doing this again. I'm not sitting home while you walk into obvious traps trying to protect me. This is different. They sent your picture. They're specifically threatening you. Which is exactly why I'm coming. If this is about me, I get a say." Adrian wanted to argue, wanted to lock her in the penthouse with James and every security measure he could arrange. But he'd learned over the past 4 months that Evelyn didn't respond to being protected like a possession. She was a partner. That meant facing threats together even when every instinct screamed to shield her from danger. "Okay," he said. "But we bring James, and we call the police." "And tell them what? That we got a cryptic text message? They won't move on that." "Then we bring weapons, body armor, everything. We bring everything and we face this together, like we've faced everything else." She said it with such certainty, such absolute trust that they could survive whatever came next. Adrian wished he shared that confidence, but he'd seen too much, lost too much, nearly died too many times to believe they were invincible. But he believed in her, in them, in the possibility that love might actually be stronger than the violence that kept trying to destroy it. "Okay," he said again. "Together." They got dressed in silence. Dark clothes, practical shoes. Adrian retrieved the handgun he'd bought after the shooting. Legal, registered, something he'd sworn he'd never need but kept anyway because hope wasn't a strategy. James was waiting in the lobby when they came down. He took one look at their faces and didn't ask questions, just checked his own weapon and nodded. The drive to the waterfront took 20 minutes through empty streets. The warehouse district was industrial decay and forgotten shipping containers. Nothing here but rust and rats and the kind of darkness that swallowed sound. The coordinates led them to a building that looked abandoned. Broken windows, graffiti tags, a padlock on the main door that had been cut recently, metal shavings still bright on the ground. "This is a trap," James said quietly. "I know," Adrian replied. "We should call for backup." "There's no time. Whoever sent that message chose midnight for a reason. They want this done before anyone can intervene." "Then let me go in first." "No, they want me. If anyone else goes in, they might—" Adrian stopped, couldn't say it, couldn't voice the fear that if he didn't do exactly what they wanted, Evelyn would pay the price. James's expression tightened, but he nodded. "I'll be right behind you. Anything goes wrong, I'm coming in." Adrian turned to Evelyn, cupped her face in his hands, memorized the feeling of her skin against his palms, because there was a very real possibility this was the last time he'd touch her. If this goes bad, it won't. If it does, run. Don't try to save me. Just run and let James get you out. "Adrian, promise me." Evelyn's eyes were bright with tears she refused to let fall. "I can't." "You have to." "No, I didn't survive everything we've been through just to lose you now. Whatever's in there, we face it, and we survive it, both of us." The conviction in her voice steadied something in Adrian's chest. This woman who'd walked into his life as a transaction and become the only thing worth dying for. The only thing worth living for. "I love you," he said. "I know. Don't make it sound like goodbye." He kissed her, hard and desperate and real. Then he pulled away and walked toward the warehouse. The door opened with a metallic shriek that echoed through the empty space. Inside was darkness, cut by slivers of moonlight through broken skylights, the smell of oil and decay, footsteps echoing on concrete. Adrian's hand rested on the gun in his jacket, every nerve screaming danger. "Hello, Adrian." The voice came from the shadows ahead. Male, older, familiar in a way that made Adrian's skin crawl. A figure stepped into the light. Adrian's world tilted. The man standing 20 feet away was someone he recognized from old photographs, from his father's office, from board meetings decades ago before Adrian had been old enough to attend them. Victor Reeves, his father's original business partner, the man who'd helped build Whitmore Industries from nothing in its earliest days. The man his father had forced out 30 years ago in a hostile takeover that left Reeves with nothing. "You're supposed to be dead," Adrian said. Victor smiled. It was a terrible expression. "Your father thought so. Made a good attempt at it, too. Ruined my reputation, stole my company, left me with debt I couldn't pay. I had a heart attack 6 months after he pushed me out. Everyone assumed it killed me. I let them believe it." "Why?" "Because dead men don't have to follow rules. Dead men can plan, can wait, can watch their enemy build everything on stolen foundations, and know that eventually the bill comes due." Adrian's hand tightened on the gun. "What do you want?" "Everything your father took from me. But since he's dead, I'll settle for taking everything from you instead." "The company? You can't—" "I don't want the company. I want you to feel what I felt. The loss, the helplessness, the slow destruction of everything you built." Adrian's blood went cold. "Evelyn,